hit subscribe. Subscribe to my guy, Uncle D. Tell him Big Bass sent you.
Spurling. I'm an attorney here in Houston, Texas, an advocate for black men, largely because I am a black man. I'm a black father. I have black sons. Hey, man, I do what I do.
What's up? I got the small screen. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the broadcast. My name is Dennis Spurling. I'd like to give a shout out to everybody already in the chat room. Shout out Mr. 43TX. Shout out to Valeria Walker. Welcome to the membership that makes you special. Thank you so much. Who else we got in here? My man Boris Barracuda. I think I already said Mr. 43TX. Mr. Mark the Freelancer. Who else? All my people in here, man. If you can hear me clearly, hit the number 1 button. If you can hear me clearly, hit the number 1 button. I need to make sure that you can hear me clearly because, you know, sometimes, every now and then, the sound is not coming in. You can't hear my loud, raspy voice. But anyway, man, welcome back. Welcome back. It's good to see everybody here. Please take the opportunity to hit the number 1 button to let me know that you can hear me clearly. That's going to let me know we can get this thing headed off in the right direction. Shout out to all my people, man. I had an occasion to drive to Austin yesterday with my sons. My uncle passed away, and he was married to the same woman for 48 years. And my God, he was, I rarely ever use this term, but he was a real man. He took care of his wife. He took care of his children. Just a great guy. Beautiful, beautiful man. I learned so much from him. He had to come get me out of handcuffs one day when I was about 10 years old. Loss prevention caught me at the local store. And, my mother wouldn't come get me. So my uncle had to come get me out of jail, out of the loss prevention in the back of the store. So shout out to him. But he was a Marine also, and shout out to all the Marines. Big up to all the Marines. Shout out to all the military folks, all the black veterans. Shout out to all the veterans, but specifically, I want to talk to the black veterans. Shout out to all of the black veterans. And that is going to play a very instrumental part in today's discussion. The discussion on black veterans, the discussion on our men who are willing to use firearms to defend this country. Those are you guys would not believe how instrumental they have been in pushing forward our fight for civil rights. Okay. So anyway, like I always tell you guys, if you learn something, then I should earn something. Okay. If you learn something, then I should earn something. If you learn something, I should earn. Okay. If you learn something, you should earn something. That being the case, today is now the 47th president again, and he's been in office since January. And we are now in the midst of a hot summer. And you see ICE is busy, the DHS is busy. And, ICE is in the streets, and they're out there in a major way, right? Rounding up, they're not just rounding up felons, okay? They pulling up on working men and women out of their homes, mostly black and brown. I've seen a few folks of the Caucasian persuasion, but for the most part, it's just black and brown. People are losing employees. Kids are coming home and to empty apartments and homes. And social media is flooded with videos and protests of people begging for help. But here's the cold truth. You know, some of you folks asked for this. You see? I mean, look at the data. In this election, Donald Trump won nearly 48% of the Latino vote. He carried 51% of the foreign-born Latinos, and people who are now being dragged out of their homes in front of their children. Okay, he increased his numbers amongst even African and Caribbean immigrants. All right, okay. These folks came to the country and thought that they could just vote Republican and that would curry favor with the dominant society. It didn't work out like that. You see, you saw our struggles. They saw it. They mocked us. They said we were lazy and entitled. They said we played the victim card. They told us we need to work harder. Somebody type work harder in the chat room. Remember that? Now the hammer is coming down and you want us to march beside you. When I say us, I'm talking about foundational Black Americans. Somebody type FBA in the chat room. You want foundational Black Americans to rally in the streets. You see, you're shouting, Black people are next. That's what they're telling us. They're saying Black people are next. And, you know, question. You see? Question. What do you mean by that? Because, see, they've done everything they possibly could do to us, and we're still here. So you must mean next to be deported, right? That's what you mean. Because we've been put in jail. We've had our families separated, haven't we? You see? But somehow everything they've done to us, we're still here today. So let's get something straight. Black people are not next. First of all, we are always been on, but the most important thing, we're not next to be deported because foundational Black Americans are not deportable. There are over 45 million people of African descent in the United States of America. And approximately 10% of those are new immigrants. And if you add the first generation immigrant children, that comes up to about 25%. So that means that about 75% of what are the people of African descent in the United States, which is about 34 million, are foundational Black Americans, people who can trace their roots to a time period back to the 1860 census. People can go all the way back to a time before this was even a country, a time before even slavery started. We have ancestors that were in this country before it was even founded. And I'm going to talk about that tonight. So, you know, some of us were already here, but, you know, and we didn't immigrate here. Okay. We were imported as slaves, many of us. And we built this country under lash. And here's the difference between us and everybody else with melanin. We don't flee, we fight. And white folks know it. So let me explain why that's not going to happen. And I'm talking about deportation. And while I do, you know, I want you to understand that white America isn't looking at us the same as they're looking at these immigrants. There's a relationship and an understanding between white America and foundational Black Americans that's rarely spoken about publicly. And I'm speaking about it right now. And I spoke about it the other day, but it's a real visceral and it's deeply historical. They know we fight because we have fought. They may teach their children about Dr. Martin Luther King, but in their bones, they remember that even Dr. King carried a gun for protection before he was turned into a symbol of passive resistance. They know we're not passive. You see? And we were never docile. We didn't go quietly. Now, there was over 300 recorded slave revolts in America alone. And when I say America, I'm referring to the continental United States that now sits as the 50 states But in reality, the America we know of today was not here 300 years ago. But there were 300 recorded slave revolts in that territory, that land. And there are hundreds of ship mutinies during the transatlantic slave trade, from Gabriel Prosser to Denmark Vesey, to Nat Turner, to John Brown's black lieutenants. Our people have shed blood for our freedom. And we didn't just protest, we picked up arms. And the Deacons of Defense, somebody type Deacons of Defense in the chat room. The Deacons of Defense and Justice, they carry shotguns to protect civil rights workers in Louisiana and Mississippi. You understand? The brother Robert F. Williams, who was the head of the Monroe, Louisiana NAACP, he armed black men to defend themselves from the KKK long before the Black Panthers arrived. We had generations of men who went to war overseas and then came home and had to go to war again on American soil, okay? And the thing is, white America knows this. They know this in their history. They may pretend otherwise in public discourse, but behind closed doors, it's understood. And what's understood don't need to be said. Now, FBA are the only group of people in this country with a documented history of organized, sustained, violent resistance against this unjust authority that we've been put on. Not for chaos. And I want it to be understood. Black Americans are not violent people, but we will defend ourselves. We didn't do it for conquest. We did it for freedom. You see, other groups were colonized, but they fled. Other groups came to America, but they assimilated. We stayed, we resisted, and we forced change. You see, we bled in the streets. We buried our martyrs, and we never ran. And that's why, despite our pain, our oppression, and our poverty, we are still here. We're standing, and we're going to continue standing. And see, that's why they know. That's why they may not like us, but they respect us enough. Even when they hate us, they know better. Because they know if they ever cross that line and they go too far with us again, we'll do what we always have done. We will fight back. So no, to all you immigrants who are out there hating on Black Americans, we're not next as far as deported. You can't deport what's rooted in the soil. You can't scare what's already survived the fire. You can't beg us to save you when you spent years denying who we are. We don't flee, we fight. And everybody knows it. We fought on the plantation. We fight in the courts, in the streets. We didn't run, we didn't retreat. We didn't get on boats and head to Canada or Haiti or Ghana. We have no homeland other than this one that we're standing on right now. So we're not going back anywhere. The other thing is, we're not visitors. This land is stained with our blood, our sweat, and embedded within its soil is our DNA. So no, we're not next. We're the foundation. So let's be clear. I want y'all to be clear. You all immigrated here, okay? We were born here, okay? We were born in this fire. And now that it's burning, you too, and you realize you're not built for this. You want us to come out. You want us to pull up. But where were you when the fire was in our house? Where were you when we were marching in the 1950s? Where were you when we were dying on those trees down south after Reconstruction? Where were you recently when we were warning you? Foundational Black Americans are not obligated to save people who distanced themselves from us, who mocked us and voted against our interests in hopes of achieving adjacent whiteness. Because again, we don't flee, we fight. And that's why we're here. But that's why we're standing down. That's why we're not marching. You see? Now, you all need to understand something. There's a lot going on right now. It's a lot of scabs being taken off some wounds, see? And a lot of that has to do with the fact that you have about 25% of the people here in the United States who are of African descent, but they are immigrants, recent immigrants, or their parents are immigrants. So their loyalties are not necessarily to the United States. And they have some misunderstandings of who we are. Now, I'm going to share some information with you guys. I want you to see what we're dealing with out here. Y'all listen to this.
To me about an immigrant, man. Look.
Listen to this.
A lot of hatred, disdain, and jealousy that needs to be removed. A lot of dead weeds. This is a 59-year-old nurse.
Developing any type of relationship with
nurse.
I hate them. I hate them. End of story.
So before this any come together, there's a lot of hatred, disdain, and jealousy that needs to be removed. A lot of dead weeds. This is a 59-year-old nurse that's about to say what they're about to say.
Africans and African Americans, we've never gotten along. Not today, not yesterday, not 20 years ago, not 100 years. We've never gotten along. We don't get along. All I'm saying is that stay in your lane and I stay in my own lane. I don't have any interest or desire to have that kind of relationship that I know will never be. There is no need for me to pretend to like you.
I want y'all to take this in. This is an African woman who's almost 60 years old, at least when this video was recorded. And she is in the United States somewhere publicly telling Black Americans that she doesn't like us, she doesn't want to be our friends, which is perfectly acceptable. But she's also saying that listen to what she's saying. It sounds like it's a lot of hate going on in here. And I want you all to understand that these are the type of people that immigration allows to come over here. Okay. I just want you to understand these folk do not necessarily represent the Africans in Africa, the Jamaicans in Jamaica, the Trinidadians in Trinidad. These are not the Haitians in Haiti. Okay. These are the ones who fled. Okay. This is the mentality of the ones who fled. These are the ones who they let over here. The ones who've been thoroughly screened. All right. This is the mentality that these folk come over here. I want you to listen to this lady.
You don't like me, and I with my full chest. I don't like you either. So this one that we're supposed to come together, don't ask me to come and join you to march down the street for whatever cause it is you're marching. I'm not coming to march anywhere with you. So all I'm saying is that, why are we here asking each other to get along? Thinking that,
we didn't ask you all to come over here. And we're not asked, shout out to Yaya's kids. We didn't ask you to come over here. You all decided to come over here after we got everything all laid out. And now you're here looking for an opportunity. You probably don't even like America. You don't like us because we're Americans. And now you're here, probably angry and bitter because you didn't get the money you were supposed to get. It's not the land of milk and honey. You having to deal with racism and bigotry and all that stuff, that class colorism and sexism and all that stuff that we talked about. And now you're angry and bitter and you want to blame Black people. So let's keep listening. Shout out to Yaya's kids.
We think African sisters were better than, I think I'm African. I'm better than African American. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't have any African American friend. I don't need.
What makes you better than African American women, ma'am? I mean, I'm just saying, I would like to know, what do you think you are? What makes you a better woman than all of the African Americans? Just round them all up, right? And you're better than each and every one of them. Okay. These are the people that you all want us to, where all the Pan-Africans at? This is who you want us to unify with? All you Pan-Africans out there, these are the people you want us to unify with? This is somebody's grandmother, somebody's mother. This is the mentality that they come over here with. This is who you want us to unify with? And you wonder why we've had so much resistance? Huh? I think it's a fool's errand, but let's keep listening to this lovely lady speak.
To be friends with any African American, there's nothing friendship with them that I find interesting through in university. I don't have any ounce of interest in developing any type of relationship with any of my
sounds
African
like you went through some really traumatic
I don't have
experience,
any interest, zero. If I see you coming
There's
down
some
the
type of
road like
trauma,
this,
yeah.
I turn around and go the other way. I don't have any interest.
You need to go on back to your job and down there in Fort Lauderdale somewhere and keep on cleaning toilets. Somebody type clean toilets. You need to keep on changing old white folks' bedpans and cleaning toilets. That's just, we know why you're angry. You tired of smelling, you tired of, you hate when they have Jell-O pudding day. That's what's going on. Shout out to Tobias Judah. That Jell-O pudding come out and it's a little runny and wet, and you got to clean them old wrinkly white people booties. And now you're angry with Black Americans. I see. I know what it is. Go on back in and change some bedpans and clean some toilet. We know why you angry.
Whatsoever to have a relationship with you. I hate them. I hate them. End of story.
I hate them. That's what she said. She's referring to Black America. I hate them. Know what you hate is cleaning up that dirty ring around that bathtub, okay? Because old people leak. They leaking that poop. That diarrhea is leaking out. And every time, you go down and get them out, you got to go right back in there and get you some Clorox. What you need to do is get you a little ammonia and mix with a little bleach, okay? And get down in there with your knuckles and scrub that toilet. You better clean them white folks' bathtub, okay? You need to clean Meemaw and Paw-Paw's bathtub, even if they had a little diarrhea accident. Put the diaper on tighter, okay? And you wouldn't have to do that. Man, we understand why you're angry. Shout out to Sergey Keeper. We understand why you're angry. Okay, you tired of cleaning up corn giblets. You hate corn day. You hate when they have corn down there at the nursing home. I know what it is. I understand what it is, but you're going to have to keep dealing with it.
There's no solution. I hate them, period. Saying, I beat my full chest to say I take ownership of how I feel. You don't have to expose me. I will tell you how I feel. You don't have to second guess me and say, oh, these people are this thing, that thing, and I'm going to expose them. You are not exposing anything. Me, I will tell you how I feel. And I'm telling you how I feel.
So in conclusion, anyone that has this amount of hatred.
She told us how she felt. Okay, well, at least she's being honest. At least we all know, right? This is somebody type unity in the chat room. Somebody type, this is who they want you all to unify with, right? I don't know. I don't know about that. Let's go ahead and keep listening. We got some more people talking. Let's let everybody talk. Go ahead. Let's see what this
out here. I don't understand why, as an African American, I say this as someone who's African American and Caribbean American, I don't understand why you would think that ICE agent would give a fuck.
Now, young lady, you got to watch your language on this broadcast. Okay, that you came off top with the F-bomb. You're gonna have to watch that filthy mouth. Okay, I don't care how many relaxers you put on your hair. You're not cute enough to cuss on my show. Okay, I'm cute too. And I've been cutting back on the. You can't be in here cussing. Watch it. Watch it. Let's keep listening to her. She says she's FBA and Caribbean. You need to pick one, baby. Go ahead.
Fight for people who don't even like me in regards to like Caribbean Americans or Africans, or like they look down on us and all that stuff. Everybody wants to be a perpetual fucking victim.
At least I got a country I could go back to. That's what they used to tell Black Americans. At least I got a country I could go back to.
And they say it while they're here in our country. That's the cold part. Why would you come like that other African lady, that angry nurse? You come to our country and give us static. What if I went to somewhere like Ghana and just spoke just horribly about people from Ghana? Or I went to Jamaica and spoke, they would run me out of there, right? I'm just saying, why do you come to our country to talk bad about us? If Black Americans weren't here and you foreigners from other parts of the diet, if you were the only ones here, you would not survive one day. You hide under our cover. They would get rid of you. You would not be able to handle it here. You hide under the umbrella and pretend like you're foundational Black American or just don't say anything about it. And then and then you reap the benefits, and then you have the nerve to talk about it. Let's continue to listen to what the brother said.
What's wrong? You don't want to go home now? And these Black immigrants be acting like their countries don't be deporting Black people. Let's check this out. Ghana deporting Nigerians for begging. Ghana, Nigeria deporting people. The Bahamas Bro, they deported everybody. The entire diaspora is getting deported in the Bahamas. And it seemed like nobody liked the Haitians. Well, according to her reasoning, the entire black diaspora is xenophobic. If there was deportation Olympics, the Bahamas is winning. They ain't caring. And then these immigrants try to fearmonger with, oh, black Americans could get deported too. No.
No, we can't. We can't get deported because, number one, we have the right to be here and we know it, and we will fight. You see, that's the difference between us. But let's let the brother finish.
The only people that's getting deported is black immigrants, and when they come over here and have kids on American soil. I don't want to use that word because, yeah, it's offensive, but you know what I'm saying.
You mean anchor baby, sir? Anchor, see, I want y'all to see he's high yellow. I'm a red N-word. You see the difference? See us? I'm red. I'm gonna say it. I ain't scared. He light skinned, and I'm a red N-word. You know the difference. Like, for instance, Muhammad Ali, red N-word. You see what I'm saying? Who else? Let's think of some more. Cat Williams, red N-word. You see? Al B. Shore, light skin. That's the difference. I'm gonna let y'all go, but go ahead, little brother.
Talking about.
All right, let's see. All right, cool. I appreciate that. Let's go ahead and keep rolling through it. Well, y'all hit the number one button. Let me hear y'all talk.
The immigrant guys, let's talk about this. Let's take academics, for example. Immigrant. This man was supposed to be a mathematical biologist. He's seen our culture here in America. It's like, this shit crazy. Because where they come from, it's not going down like that.
They gonna kill. I ain't gonna let them kill me with that music. That music playing in the background is gonna mess it up. Basically, the brother's going on to just say these immigrant guys, they come in and they cosplay black Americans. And now they're talking about things that we stopped talking about. They talk about all this street beef. And a lot of us who grew up in the 80s and the 90s, we like, man, we're beyond that. We're trying to take care of our families and our children. You see what I'm saying? So that's what he's talking about. Now, I like this young brother, man. If you have an opportunity to check his check his Instagram page out. Check out this young brother right here. He has a lot of very interesting things to say. This young brother is down. He is in Florida. I believe he's in South Florida. All right. And I think he called it Hood Smart. Hood underscore smart. Tell him Uncle D sent you. But listen to what he has to say. He is really holding it down, because I can imagine he's a foundational black American brother down there in South Florida, and, you know, surrounded by Africans and immigrants and from the diaspora. So listen to what the brother has to say. It's very poignant, and it's going to segue us into where we're going tonight. Hit the number one button. Let me know you can hear.
When you black immigrants say things like this, it just shows how much you don't know about black American history and how much of white American propaganda you've been slurping up. All my black immigrants, just for the record, we're going to say this for the record. Black Americans are the only groups of blacks in the whole entire world that are still dealing with the oppressors. We didn't run, and we have not been defeated.
And we are the only group of black people who are in their state or in the country surrounded by white folks, and we didn't volunteer to come here, because I know there's people in the UK that you all volunteered to go up there. Okay, but for the most part, all these other countries have their own. They got their own countries, and they're the ones in charge. They're you know, the prime ministers, ambassadors, whatnot. All of them look like them. That's not our case. But let's keep listening to the brother.
Just in case you forgot, that's very important for you to understand. So what I think it is, I don't think a lot of y'all understand how high the racial tension was between black America and white America after slavery. Jim Crow, the Toulouse massacres, dealing with the KKKs, police brutality. Why you think we started the Black Panther Party? Why you think we had them guns out in the white boy's head ready to unload? Just in case a pig got out of line. You know what I'm saying? What you think that was about? I'll even argue this. The reason why they even let you other black groups in here, you other black immigrants into this country, is because you guys were brought here to be a more docile group of blacks. They knew the tension between black America and white America was too high, that they got to bring somebody in here who are going to work the jobs and for cheap, and who are going to comply, because you guys were desperate. You Haitians, you Jamaicans, you Africans, you guys are coming from failed countries and failed islands, and you're just looking for work. We were not that desperate. We was putting belt to ass, and it was going to continue. So if you want to ask why we are not as aggressive, or why we're not as aggressive with white folks, it's because you're in the way. If you were to get out the way, it'll be a different story.
Boy, he was cooking. Somebody type buffer class in the chat room. So let's go ahead and get into this, man. You guys are going to learn something. We're going to be here for a minute. We're going to talk about something that I've never heard talked about in any detail tonight. And I'm going to walk you through some of the many moments of rebellion, defiance, and courage that took place during slavery and afterwards, okay? And unlike the Haitian Revolution, and we're going to be talking about rebellion, somebody type rebellion in the chat room, okay? Unlike the Haitian Revolution, they outnumbered the French by about 500,000, you see? And they also benefited from the support of European rivals. Foundational Black Americans, we've been outnumbered, we've been outgunned, and we've been utterly alone for centuries. We have no foreign allies, no sympathetic governments, no nearby sanctuaries other than Mexico, where a couple of thousand of us ran down to, even though they had slavery and horrible anti-Black sentiments that they still harbor. And yet we fought back, you know, against all odds, against a fully armed society, right? Determined to keep us in chains. We resisted, but not, well, let me say it like this. You know, see, there was no United States as we know it when some of these early rebellions happened, like in New York, the uprising that took place in 1712, okay? They call that Gabriel Prosser's insurrection. There was no United States, okay? Back then, what we call America was basically just a string of rough colonial outposts clinging to the Atlantic seaboard, New York, Pennsylvania, the Carolinas, Virginia, and a few others. The rest was wilderness and frontier and foreign territory. And so by the time Nat Turner Rebellion rolled around in 1831, or the Creole Rebellion in Creole Rebellion, that was in 1841. Nat Turner was in 1831, 10 years before. The United States, or what we call the United States, by that time it had expanded, but it was still a far cry from the coast to coast superpower that we have today. Okay, there was no Arizona, Nevada, there's no Montana, Idaho, no North, South Dakota, no Wyoming, no Washington, no Oregon. The West wasn't settled. It was indigenous land or loosely claimed territories, and much of it wouldn't become states until after the Civil War. In fact, 1860, just before the Civil War, was you know, at that point, the country was made up of a fragile mix of slave states, free states, and these unorganized territories. The idea of a unified American identity was laughable at that point. You know, the nation was divided. You had division between Black and white. You had division amongst white people, abolitionists in the North and planters in the South. And even within the South, there were poor white people who resented the rich white people, right? Because they didn't even own any slaves. You see, there was no consensus. There was no cavalry. And so when rebellion broke out, when Black folk decided to take up arms, okay, there were hundreds of them. Okay, hundreds of rebellions between 1619 and 1860. And that's just in the U.S. territory. I'm going to talk to you about one that happened in Spanish territory down in Florida. Shout out to everybody in Florida. But what I'm saying is there was no backup coming. There was nobody these white folk could call. There was no federal task force. There was no overwhelming police presence. You out there in the wilderness by yourself. These white settlers and plantations, they were on their own. They were isolated in these plantations and towns. There was no cell phones, no email. And they were surrounded by the very people that they were trying to enslave. And that is, can you imagine that level of fear? I mean, one pit bull got most of y'all running to the top of your car trying to get away. Can you imagine being surrounded by hundreds and hundreds of black people who you've done wrong? Their foods was being poisoned, okay? A lot of these people were being unalived in their sleep. They were the white folk being ambushed on the road. Families were being slaughtered. There was 300 some rebellions. That means this was happening every year. Every year somebody got. Imagine the climate. Imagine the paranoia. Okay? They didn't have the Xanax back then either. Every creak on the floorboard. Can you imagine that? Every whisper in the field, every fire on the horizon. White America literally lived in terror, okay? Not just because of the color of our skin, but because they knew what we were capable of, because we were doing it. We scared the living bejesus out of these white folk. And that's what separates FBA from every other group of African descendants on the planet. We never fled, we resisted. And they don't teach you this in school at all. And here's the thing, we're still here. Still on the front lines. We stayed in the lines there, we bled in it, and we pushed back. So I want to take this opportunity to kind of walk you all through the real history of the United States and our fight for freedom. And it wasn't all about protest, because these Africans and Caribbeans, they love to tell you how we beg. We begging, y'all begging. No, we fought. You see? We fought on the slave ships. We fought from New York to Louisiana. Now, I want to begin with something that's very rarely discussed, and this is San Miguel de Guadalupe in 1526. So before the first slaves were brought to Jamestown in 1619, we are in 1526. Columbus sailed the ocean blue and got lost in the Dominican Republic in 1492. We are 1526. Okay? And this is just one that's documented. This is a little over 30 years later, long before the first official U.S. Census of 1790. Before the United States, before Jamestown or Plymouth Rock, there was San Miguel de Guadalupe, okay, founded in 1529 by a Spanish explorer named Lucas Vasquez de Ayllon. And this little European settlement, it was located in what is now South Carolina, or Georgia, somewhere up in there. And it was an attempt by the Europeans or the Spain to colonize the mainland of what will become the United States. And it wasn't the last time. So along with the settlers, Ayllon, spelled Ayllon, brought approximately 100 enslaved Africans, not citizens, not homeboys, not partners, but human cargo to build this colony. There were no passive victims. There was warriors, there were farmers, there were craftsmen who were forcibly taken from their homes in Africa, but not stripped of their will to fight. They were in a strange land, okay? You see? And what was going on is the Spanish were clashing. Their egos were clashing. And they were dying. And the Africans saw their moment. You see? See, the conditions in San Miguel de Guadalupe quickly deteriorated. Disease ravaged the Spaniards. Their supplies ran low. The colony was disorganized and chaotic. But amidst that crumbling dream of this Spanish crown, the enslaved Africans said, oh, time for rebellion. You see? The first known of its kind in North America. You understand me? The San Miguel de Guadalupe uprising. They seized the opportunity, they rose up, they turned on their enslavers, and they killed several of the colonials. They then defied every expectation of their captors, the African slave. These black people escaped into the surrounding wilderness, and they sought refuge with the local Native American tribes. In some accounts, they were welcomed and integrated into the Native communities. You understand? And they formed alliances, and that lasted for generations. These Africans literally were adopted into these Native American communities down in Georgia and Florida and South Carolina. But nevertheless, as you can imagine, the Spanish colony, it collapsed after because of disease, rebellion, environmental hardship. It just ended as a quick demise. You see what I'm saying? They had to come try to claim the New World, but it was the Africans who wrote the first chapter of resistance in this land. And so this is just the first one. This is 1526. You understand me, family? Now let's slide forward a couple of hundred years to 1712 in New York City. Some of you all don't realize that New York City had slaves too. Even after the Civil War, they had slaves. Okay? Well, before, I should say, right before. And we're not talking about cotton fields of the South. That's not the only thing that defines slavery. They had slavery in the North. They outlawed it. Okay? They outlawed it. But here we are in the heart of the colonial New York City, the cobblestone streets, some of you all in New York are still walking along these streets. And you had enslaved Africans. And these people in 1712, in 1741, waged the earliest and most unnerving riots or revolts in American history. They were not the plantations of Virginia or sugar mills of the Caribbean. This was urban battlefield, and the enemy wasn't just slavery. It was the illusion of northern innocence. See, the first uprising came on the night of April 6, 1712. You sleeping, you there chilling and having a good time. Next thing you know, bam, it's on. See, at that time, Black people made up about 20% of the city's population, and the tensions were rising. See, that night around 24, 25, 2 dozen Black folks, okay, who are from the Akan and the Congo nations, which is a little below Nigeria, they made a stand, okay? They did it near a pine forest in Maiden Lane, not far from Wall Street, where Wall Street stands right now. They carried guns, they carried hatchets, they carried knives, and after setting fire to some buildings near Broadway, right, that same Broadway that you all travel down, they ambushed some white folks who rushed in to try to extinguish the blaze. So they set a trap for them. They set some stuff on fire, set some buildings on fire, and when the white folk came in to try to put the fire out, they unalived 9 of them, okay, and wounded 6. So they set them up. That was treacherous. Can you imagine? Keep in mind, most of the stuff was created out of wood back then. So if one part of the city caught fire, the rest of it would. You see? Nevertheless, the response to that was swift. Though they put up a citywide manhunt, and 72 Black people were arrested, and 21 of them were executed. They literally burned them alive, right? Some of them were hung. One man, he was tied to a chain and left to starve. Another, they had to try to set an example. And then three decades later, 1741, fear turned to hysteria. Again, these people were afraid. You understand? They were on edge. It was a cold winter. It was hit hard. Food prices were high. And the resentment, once again, boiled beneath the surface between the rich and the poor whites and the Black enslaved, and the fire started again. Some mysterious arson happened. The governor's mansion was nearly destroyed. The fort that they had burned up. Mind you, they needed that fort. They needed that fort to keep them Indians at bay. You see, it was a Black man named Caesar. He had a reputation as being a skilled and a fierce intellectual, you see? And he was accused of masterminding the plot. This is 1741, before the country was even founded. All right, they even held some trials. And it is fueled by, they forced some confessions out of some people. 160 people were arrested. Over 100 Black men and women, and a few poor whites, because the poor whites they had back then hadn't been duped by the successful whites like they have now. They realized they were being treated just as bad as the Black folks. But nevertheless, they end up lynching 30 black people, and 13 were burned at the stake, and 70 were banished from the colony. Caesar, of course, as he was a ringleader, he was executed. You see what I'm saying? But here's the thing. That wasn't it. Okay? That was, and some of you guys have I'm sure you all have heard of the Stono Rebellion. How many of y'all have heard of the Stono Rebellion? STNO Rebellion. Have you guys heard of the Stono Rebellion? Have you heard of that? That was also way back in the 1700s. The Stono Rebellion. See, these are not things they're going to teach you because they don't want you to realize that we fought back. We were never just these passive folks who just accepted our condition as though we were born to be slaves. The human spirit is indomitable. You see, you can only keep people enslaved so long. They have a yearning for freedom. You see, and that's no different than us. So we talk about San Miguel de Guadalupe. We talked about the New York City slave rebellions, and so now the Stono Rebellion. See, now this is particular. It started on a Sunday morning. Just imagine. Why did you think they started on Sunday? It's the time when white folks are in church. September 9th, 1739. It was down in South Carolina. Okay? And at this point, it was 20 black people, 20 Africans, 20 black people believed to have been from the kingdom of the Congo in West Central Africa. They didn't volunteer to come here. These people didn't volunteer. They didn't go through an immigration process. They weren't properly screened. No, they they were forced to come here. And these men were no strangers to war. They were veterans of war. They were warriors. You understand? How do we start off with this conversation? Warriors. Just like our foundational Black American soldiers set off our civil rights march and our march for freedom, our fight for freedom. These men in the Stono Rebellion, they were warriors. And their leader was a man named Jimmy Cato, or Cato in some records, but Jimmy is what they call him. And he was literate, which means he could read. He was Catholic, and he was influenced by the Portuguese missionaries before he was captured and sold into slavery. What I need y'all to understand is this, and this goes back into when I talked about reparations for foundational Black Americans. So everybody has you believe that the leaders in these African tribes were just some dudes out there swinging from trees, unsophisticated. No, the Congo had a special relationship with the Portuguese. Even today, a lot of the elite have Portuguese surnames and names. They were educated. They would literally send their children to be educated in Portugal. So these were educated. They knew numbers, they knew history, they knew math, and they struck deals with the Portuguese for slaves, for slave trade. These people knew exactly what they were doing. And so anybody who is still holding Africa innocent, you're a fool at this point. You're an idiot at this point. But nevertheless, Jimmy was one of the educated people, and he understood Portuguese, and he spoke and he read, and he was also a warrior. And he and some of his comrades gathered at near Stono River, which is southwest of Charleston, and struck the first blow at a local store. They unalived the shopkeeper and took all his weapons and all his ammunition. In some kind of way, they got some drums, and they start rallying and they start marching towards a Spanish Florida, right? Here we go, Florida again, where the Spanish crown had promised freedom to the enslaved Africans who reached their territory and converted to Catholicism. See, the Spanish were not only interested in moral claims of liberty, they sought to determine undermine the British colonies by draining them of their labor force. See, white folk in Europe have been fighting each other for literally thousands of years. And the Spanish and the English have never been friends for any long period of time. They were fighting it out. And so, here you are, you trying to get your neighbors slaves to riot and come on down there with you. Now, so basically they say, yeah, come on down. You be free down here. Because the Spanish, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later, they unified on religion. You see, not so much color, but religion. Because remember, they just got rid of the Moors. The Moors had occupied Spain for some 800 years. You see, and so they were like, yeah, come on down. So the brothers was down there. They were marching. They were shouting liberty, liberty. The numbers went from a couple dozen to 80 men. And along the way, they burned plantations. They unalived between 20 to 25 of these British colonists, men, women, and children. Can you imagine that? The only people they spared and who showed mercy were the ones who had a reputation for treating fair. So it wasn't just about white. It was about, they wasn't just hurting innocent white folk. The ones who were kind and fair, hey, they let them go. You see? Now, the rebellion was swift and it was terrifying to these white people. Shout out to my beautiful sister, the Crimson Cure. Shout out to Urban Eagle. Okay? It's scared. Y'all make sure y'all check out the Crimson Cure. Y'all, she's always over there giving that good knowledge over there, setting them straight. You see? But here's what I need you to understand. This scared the living bejesus out of these white folk. This is the environment that they were living in. You see? But of course, this was met with brutal resistance. So by the afternoon, the colonial militia had mobilized. Okay, they called 911. Okay, and a fight took place, and some of the rebels were unalived outright. They got killed off rip, and the others, some were captured, some were executed publicly to try to warn, to deter, and the rest of them scattered in the swamp and headed, and they were headed down the following weeks and months, and so and some of them may have escaped to Florida. But again, Florida was a problem. Somebody typed Florida problem in the chat room. And it was in the aftermath of this that South Carolina passed the Negro Act of 1740. It was a harsh set of laws that restricted Black people's movement, education. We don't want you gathering together. You can't teach them how to read. We don't want you assembling. We don't want them earning money. Because remember, Jimmy was an educated man. He had been educated in the Congo. He could read. He's an educated man. He spoke Portuguese. And so they realized this education with the right mentality. My God, these people can overthrow what we got. This is 20 men. You understand? But see, again, we're talking about what climate is this creating for these white folk who know they're doing wrong. Right? See, the Stono Rebellion remained etched in the colonial consciousness. It was a loud, defiant message that Black freedom was not a favor to be granted. It was a right to be seized. And that the spirit of Jimmy, okay? Jimmy with an E, and his men lived on, not only in the future revolts, but in the legacy of resistance that still courses through the struggle for liberation right now. You understand? Now, what about Gabriel Prosser's rebellion in 1800? Right, let me tell you a story. One of these, this is another one of these stories buried beneath centuries of silence, a story that they don't include in the textbooks. They barely whisper about it. Shout out to Rico the Great. But this story deserves to be shouted. It's the tale of enslaved Black men in Virginia who dare to dream, not just for freedom, but for power. A man envisioned a nation within a nation. You understand me? Gabriel Prosser, he envisioned a Black nation within a nation. They don't have to give it. We're going to take it. I want you to think about this. The gall of this man, right? It's 1800, the summer of 1800. This is height of slavery. Slavery been going on for centuries. He said, you know what? Hot summer night in Virginia. See, he wasn't just any slave man. He was 24-year-old blacksmith. He was intelligent. He was literate. And he was a tall man, tall, handsome man. You know, blacksmiths, they work with the metal and iron and whatnot. and he had vision. He was owned by a man named Thomas Prosser. And Gabriel spent his days forging iron and sharpening tools, but his mind, he was hammering out a revolution. He had read about Haiti. He had heard about France. He had studied the American Revolution. And in every tale of tyranny falling, he saw a blueprint. His plan, it was nothing short of revolutionary. He would lead over 1,000 armed black men, free and enslaved men, into Richmond, Virginia, seize control of the city, and take the governor, James Monroe, hostage and demand the abolition of slavery. But see, Gabriel didn't just want freedom. He wanted a new black republic right there in the belly of the South. He even forged swords and spears in secret, preparing for a war while pretending to labor. And so on August 30th, 1800, that was the day it was supposed to happen. Gabriel's army was mobilized, and the weapons were ready, and the city was in reach. But then the skies opened. You had a massive thunderstorm. It sounds like it's hurricane season, right? And the storm rolled through Richmond. It flooded all the roads. It washed out the bridges. And Gabriel men, they couldn't cross. And so the uprising stalled. And that delay proved to be fatal because while the storm raged, so did the fear and the betrayal. Okay, because what happened was two snitches, two nocturnal animals that forage and eat garbage at night, right? They went and got scared, and they went and told that white overseer. And in the panic, the Virginia militia sprang to action. They raided the plantations. They rounded up the suspects. They hunted Gabriel like he was a ghost. And for weeks, he vanished. He just disappeared. He slipped through the cracks of every system they saw. But by September 24th, 1800, about a month or so later, they captured him in Norfolk. Somebody told on him. Okay, they took him in chains. He was offered leniency. Okay, they wanted him to tell, but he didn't say anything. No word, no confession, no deal. He just chose silence. So a couple of weeks later, on October 10th, he was hung. He was hung alongside 30 of his followers where they were executed. Because see, here's the thing. Gabriel never truly died. See, his idea that black people could not only be free, but could govern themselves, that survived. And he wasn't just resisting change, he was rejecting the very premise of white supremacy. He believed that dignity was not granted by law or a slaveholder. It was born in the soul. You understand me? And these are the people that we cut from. All right, now let's move on 11. Let's move on to 1811. Let's talk about the German Coast Uprising. Shout out to all my people down in Louisiana. Okay, this is another one of the stories that are of our active resistance, right? That they don't want to talk about. This is the largest slave rebellion in the United States of America, but it's not the most famous. All right, they don't want to talk about this. I've actually been to this site. You got to go down to New Orleans. They got a little plaque. You drive right past it. They don't even. You never know. You see. Not one Hollywood film was made about this. And it happened in the shadow of sugarcane fields just outside of New Orleans. It was the year again, it was 1811. The place, they call it the German coast of Louisiana. And the men who led it, hundreds of black people who basically said enough is enough. This wasn't a few desperate men. This was an army. They had 500. That's the size of a battalion, right? Is that about the size of a battalion, fellas? Or Garrett, is that about the size of 500 black men with sugarcane knives and axes, whatever else they could find. Their goal was to march more than 20 miles downriver to New Orleans. They were going to torch every plantation as they went by, and they were going to free all the black people, claiming their liberation by force. And at the center of it was a man named Charles Dessalondes. He was a biracial enslaved black man, originally from Saint-Domingue, Haiti. Okay? See, the other thing I want you all to understand, and I know that we are on our FBA. I get that, okay? But there's some realities that we have to deal with. And I want y'all to understand the realities, okay? Louisiana was a Spanish territory. It was a French territory before it became an American territory. And so was Hispaniola, which is actually a Spanish name, okay? So imagine driving from Houston to Dallas, or driving from Buffalo, New York to New York City. All of that is the territory of New York. All of that is the territory of Texas. Going from New Orleans to Saint Domingue or Haiti was the norm. So there's a lot of mixture. If you look deep enough, you probably got some, if you FBA all the way, but if you look deep enough, your people were probably brought up from the Caribbean, because remember the Caribbean was called the seasoning plantations. They would bring the Africans over. They wouldn't bring them directly to the United States. Okay, the currents didn't work like that. The winds didn't work like that. We didn't have them coming. We would bring them up through the Caribbean, the seasoning islands. We would season them. Season them means soften them up. Season them means get some of that wild African out of them. Okay, they had to be processed. You can't just drop an African who had freedom off here. You got to take them down to the Caribbean and season him. Jamaica was notorious for seasoning. They even practiced buck breaking down there. You see? And with a lot of, I don't even want to say that, but it was definitely, it was dehumanizing, it was humiliating, it was emasculating. I'll say that. And that's why those Jamaicans are so adamant against that. They will turn on you down there, because in part of their culture, many of the enslaved men were emasculated, we'll say, as part of the buck breaking process. So this man, who was from Haiti, ended up in New Orleans or Louisiana here on the German coast. And he said, well, you know, the spirit of revolution. Now, this man, Charles Desalondes, he wasn't loud. He wasn't reckless. By all accounts, he was calculating. He was quiet. And he was sharp, and he carried knives. He was known for carrying blades. And by day, he worked as a driver on the Andre plantation. Here's the thing about it. The driver on the plantation is usually the most trusted of the slaves. Shout out to Johnny Harris. Thank you so much. He said an army battalion is 1,000, so they had 500. The driver is the most trusted, and I can see them trusting. He's light-skinned, biracial, he's probably exotic, spoke a little French, you know? You see? He was the overseer. He was the most trusted slave on the plantation. He overseed the other, but by night he was building a revolution. And it all began on the evening of January 8th, 1811. Charles and a small group of rebels attacked the Andre plantation. They wounded the plantation owner, Manuel Andre. They unalived his son, Gilbert. And then they gathered more enslaved black people from the neighboring plantations. Within hours, the rebellion swelled to hundreds of men, and they started marching towards New Orleans. Military-style discipline. They moved fast, they moved fierce, and they made it clear this wasn't about escape. This is about taking. And over the course of 2 days, they burned down at least 5 plantations. They destroyed crops, sugar houses, and homes, and they wore the stolen militia uniforms and beat the drums as they marched. They weren't hiding from confrontation. They were inviting it. You see? And then they carried with them the spirit of that Haitian revolution. See, this is not just rebellion. It's a campaign of liberation. They scared again. This is what white folk was dealing with black folk here in America. But nevertheless, by January 10th, the counterattack came. The white planters came in. They were joined by the United States military, and militia forces. You see? Many of these people were French-speaking veterans. They had fought alongside Napoleon, and they struck back. You understand what I'm saying? Remember, this was a French territory at the time. You see? They had help, okay? Or at least at one time it was. You see, they unalived about 95. They did some horrible things to them. They literally severed their heads and mounted them on pikes, and they displayed them for miles and miles along the Mississippi River. It was a warning. They were trying to scare them because they were scared. You see? For 2 days, 2 full days, Charles Dessalines and this rebel army, they sent panic throughout the whole South. What they did, again, they showed the enslavers that, you know, you could deal with some coordinated resistance. And this is what it looked like. And remember, there's nobody coming to save these folks. You see? You see? They scared these folks the way laws and lawsuits and pleas can never do. You see? They weren't waiting for Lincoln. They weren't waiting for abolitionists. They weren't even waiting for the perfect moment. They took the moment and they seized it. 500 freedom fighters. So what does that mean? If that's that's your mindset. And of course, we can talk about Denmark Vesey in 1822, city of Charleston, South Carolina. It stood on the edge of revolution. They didn't even know it. You see? They came up with these plans in the houses of worship, in the wood shop, in the markets. It was the most extensive and ambitious slave revolt ever planned in the United States. And at the center of it stood Denmark Vesey. He's a formerly enslaved man who purchased his freedom. He was a free man. Shout out to Mr. Good Vibration 144. He was a free man. And he wanted to free his people. You understand what I'm saying? He was from the Caribbean. 1776. He was enslaved. He was born in 1767. I'm sorry, he was born in the Caribbean before being brought to Charleston. And this man, let me tell you what's funny about this guy. He decides he wants to play the lottery, and he won the lottery. And he got $1,500. And with that $1,500, he bought his freedom in 1799 for $600. But see, freedom for himself meant nothing because thousands of his brothers and sisters, our brothers and sisters, was in chains. You see? So in his mind, he turned to rebellion. He was inspired by the success of the Haitian Revolution, the promise of black sovereignty. And so what did he do? He began to organize for 2 years. He planned in secret. He spoke in code. He built allies. He leaned heavily on the support from the African Methodist Episcopal Church, which functioned as both the spiritual and a refuge and a hub for revolutionary thought. And his message was clear. We are free men. Let us show you. And the plan was massive. It was a full-scale uprising. It was going to involve thousands of enslaved black people from plantations and city alike. This is free and enslaved. His lieutenants, he had a man named Peter Poyas, another man named Gullah Jack, also known as Jack Pritchard. All of them coordinated a citywide attack, and it was set to take place on July 14th, 1822. And that date was symbolic because it's Bastille Day. That's the anniversary of the French Revolution. Okay, and see, so this lets you know, okay, this is before America was the America that we know. This is kind of like a former French colony. You see what I'm saying? They planned to seize weapons. They were going to unalive their white slavers. They were going to burn Charleston to the ground and escape by ship and head to Haiti. You see? Let me tell you how. The German Coast Revolution, 500. This man had upwards of 9,000 people. Denmark Vesey had up to 9,000 people. The number is staggering considering that there wasn't a whole lot of people down there like that. You understand? Even by today's standard, he had 9,000 people set up for a revolution. And it would be, and he did it without a single shot fired. You see? Only conviction, organization, and belief of liberation. This is how much freedom and rebellion was on our minds back then. You see what I mean? I want y'all to understand that. You don't get 9,000 people and it's just your idea alone. This is something, yeah, that's a good idea. It's the time. Unfortunately, a couple of weeks before the uprising, two nocturnal animals, two house slaves betrayed the conspiracy. You see, they snitched on the plot, and and of course, the white folk sprang to action, and they took Vesey and his lieutenants, and they arrested them. The trial was held in secret. No juries, no defense attorneys. Over 130 black men were charged. 35 were executed, including Vesey, who was hung on July 2nd, 1822. And 31 of the others were exiled or imprisoned. Okay, in the African Methodist Episcopal Church, the central organizing space for the movement, that was destroyed by white mob. They went and burned the church down. Okay, then they commenced to try to smear his name, and they tried to erase him. That's why you don't hear about these. You can't let stuff like this spread. But even after his death, Vesey, Denmark Vesey became a symbol not of defeat, but of defiance. His rebellion never launched, but the idea of it took the South at its core. It shook them, you see? So, and what happened as a result? South Carolina passed stricter laws. Black literacy was criminalized. Black churches were outlawed. The entire slaveholding class had been reminded just how brittle this system was. Look, what I'm trying to explain y'all to, these were not docile people who were just gonna take it. You understand me? This was not when they try to make you, Martin Luther King is always a civil of equal rights and civil rights and rebel. That ain't it. You see, the only reason that failed was somebody inside was more loyal to bondage than freedom. And remember, it only takes one betrayal to stop a revolution, but it only takes one spark to start it again. So now we up to 1831. Nat Turner, preacher, Nat Turner, Reverend, 1831, Southampton County, Virginia. You understand? It wasn't an isolated revolt. It was the only prolonged and sustained slave uprising in U.S. history. And it's at the center. At the center was a man named Nat Turner. He was literate. He was a preacher. Okay. He was a mystic. He was a revolutionary. Okay. He was born into slavery on October 2nd, 1880. And from a young age, he was marked as different. He could read. He claimed to receive visions from God. He believed he was chosen for something greater. And that belief, after witnessing the solar eclipse, he believed it took on some divine inspiration. Shout out to Johnny Harris. So on the night of August 21st, 1831, under the cover of darkness, Turner and a small group of men, only 7 at first, they gathered at Travis Plantation, where he was enslaved. They got them axes, they got hatchets, they got muskets, and they unalived Travis and his family. Can you imagine that? You at the plantation, two plantations down, and you hear the N-words, have unalived Travis, the slave owner, and his whole family. Y'all getting out of there. But where you gonna go? You can't go to New York. They rebelling there. You can't go to the Caribbean. You darn sure gonna get it there. So this is just fear. There's nowhere to go, and there's nobody coming to save you. But what they end up doing is they move from house to house. This is Nat Turner and his people. They move from house to house, plantation to plantation. They unalive all the white folk. This is 1831. See what I mean? This is 1831. My great-great-great-grandfather was born in 1850 in slavery. You see? So, I mean, this is still within, he died in 1902. So I got people who are directly connected to him. I believe my grandfather was around when he was around. Of course, you know, my grandmother was his child's child. So what I'm trying to say is this is not so far back in history. Shout out to my man, Jack. Thank you so much. But anyway, the group marched, the numbers swelled. They went from 7 to 75 black folk. And many of them were just drawn to Nat Turner's fire. And for 2 days, they tore through Virginia. They covered nearly 20 miles. They unalived 60 white men, women, and children. But this wasn't a mindless massacre. Turner ordered the poor whites. He let the poor white people go. So it wasn't just about whites. It was about killing the oppressors. The poor whites who didn't have slaves, who didn't own slaves, he spared them. So this wasn't mindless. See, it wasn't about waging war on skin color. It was targeting the slave-holding class. So even now today, you can't hold all white people responsible directly for your oppression. Even Nat Turner knew that at the height of slavery. You see, it's about these greedy, lazy, slave-holding oligarchs who want to keep the poor people divided, who want to keep slavery and racism intact. And they trick the poor folk and the brown folk and the black folk into doing it for them. As long as we're fighting with each other, they're going to get rich. But that's something for another day. Now, word spread quick. Imagine again. Here we go again, right? So now it's August 23rd. This thing has been going on for a minute, 2 nights. You scared to death. You don't know who they're going to get. The militia showed up. The vigilante posse showed up because they didn't have a police force. You had to gather people together. We need you to come on down here, Bob. Leave your family. Who's going to protect my family? She need to come on. We got to put this rebellion down. So literally mobs had to get together to police their own communities. Nobody was coming to help. But, you know, as you guys might know, Nat Turner was caught like 2 months later. He was tried, quote unquote, and then he was hung. Okay. And the cold part about it, if you go look for his body, it's nowhere. They flayed him, they decapitated him, they mutilated him, they put his head on a spike, they put his body in all sorts of different places. They were trying to make an example. That was the response to what happened. And they even unalive over 200 black people. Many of them were innocent, but they were killed in revenge. You see? And in the aftermath, what happened? They passed some stricter laws. Shout out to Yaya's kids. They banned black people from education, restricted religious gatherings. They tightened the patrols, and and Nat Turner, he exposed a terrifying truth for slaveholders. The enslaved were never broken. They were waiting. They were waiting for a sign. They were waiting for a leader, waiting for a moment to rise. And to this day, Nat Turner remains one of the most controversial figures in America history. You see? He's a prophet to some, he's a terrorist to others. But what can't be denied is his rebellion shattered the myth of passive bondage. You see? It was a war cry. It was a signal that even the deepest pits of oppression, black resistance burns hot. You understand me? Now, I want to talk about one I find to be very peculiar. It's the story of the Creole Rebellion. Okay? The Creole Rebellion. It's never taught in school. Never been the heart of an action mirror, but it has the weight of a Shakespearean tragedy. So here's the situation. It's 1841. The place, it's a ship called the Creole. And the man who led it was a man named Madison Washington. Now, Madison Washington, he wasn't an ordinary man. He had already escaped slavery once and made it all the way to Canada. But like a scene from Django Unchained, he returned to Virginia, risking everything to rescue his wife, who was still enslaved. Some versions say he found her aboard the Creole, but there's no proof of that. What we do know is that he returned, he was captured, sold again, and placed aboard the U.S. brig of the Creole. and it was headed for Richmond, Virginia, to New Orleans with 135 black people in the hold. And so the ship left port at 1825 at about 1841. And remember, they would send folk down to New Orleans to put them on the slave ship. I mean, put them on a slave, to sell them at the slave auction. You see, if you go down to, golly, what is that place by Cafe Du Monde? There's a slave auction down there. You'll pass right by. You wouldn't even know it's there. But nevertheless, so they were sending them down there because remember, the slaves would go down there and they'll sell them, and people would go take them wherever you want to take them, Mississippi, Alabama, up in Louisiana, Missouri, wherever. Okay. But the ship left port on October 25th, 1841. 12 days later, on November 7th, that's when the revolt started. Okay. It was a revolt began with a man named Elijah Morris, who was one of the enslaved men. He approached the ship's first mate. The man name was Zephaniah Gifford, and he said, "Hey, boss, some slave, the slave overseer." He said, "Look," he told, "Look, the men are down there messing with them women in the quarters, the black women, right? The black men who are enslaved. They down there messing." And of course, the slave, they don't want nobody messing with the black women, but the white dude. So anyway, they kept the slaves separate, and so he had to go check on that. And so when they opened up the hatch to see what's going on down there, Madison, Washington, and about and over a dozen black men burst out. They launched into an uprising. They overpowered the crew. The man name was John R. Hewell, the man in charge of the group. Okay, included Washington was unalived. They were stabbed to death. Several crew members, including Captain Robert Isnor, that he was wounded. But here's what the critical part. After seizing control, Washington and the others, they spared the rest of the crew. They including the captain's wife and daughter and his niece. You see, there was no massacre. See, one thing you see in common, black people they're not trying to get these folk back, other than Nat Turner. Okay, but for the most part, what they're just trying to do is fight for their freedom. We're not into massacring people. We're not like that. We don't want blood just for blood. Okay, but this is an interesting story because the question now was, where do we go? We got this ship. Liberia was mentioned. Okay, but remember, you don't have a ship that maybe can travel to Africa. You don't have the supplies for that. But what they end up doing is they said that we don't have the supplies to go to Africa. So a gentleman named Ben the blacksmith, okay, who was also one of the people who fought for his freedom, who had unalived somebody, he said, well, let's go down to the British West Indies. Why? Because the British had abolished slavery just a year before. The British abolished slavery before America did. And so, there was a story where an American slave ship named the Hermosa had wrecked in the Bahamas, and all 38 of the people, black people, as soon as they touched that land, they were deemed free. They were set free. So they set course for Nassau, which is in the Bahamas. And on November 9th, they got there. Okay. They got there on November 9th, which is about 2 weeks later. And once they got there, once they arrived, there was a black harbor pilot that boarded the ship and informed everybody on the board, you are free. Can you imagine that? You free. As soon as you hit this land. And the British would not, the British didn't recognize American laws, but of course, America wasn't going to just accept that easily. So there was a person named Zephaniah Gifford. He was still loyal to the U.S. He notified the American consul in Nassau, and they tried to round up the group of American sailors in the Bahamas. Hey, come on in here. We need to help y'all retake this ship. Come help us retake this ship. But before they could, a contingent of Bahamian soldiers led by a white British officer, he intervened. He boarded the Creole, not to capture the freedmen, but to prevent any violence or escape. And when the American soldiers arrived to retake the ship, the Bahamians met them at the dock, armed, and told them to stand down. They held them at gunpoint. You better sit down. You see, and ultimately Madison, Washington, and the 18 men who were detained for that short period of time, okay, they became free and they got off the boat. The the sad part of this is, unfortunately, 3 women and 2 children, 5 people in total. They were afraid. They didn't want to get off the boat. And so the boat turned around and took them back to the United States. And as soon as they got back there, they were slaves again. Somebody should have got them off that boat. You know, somebody should have said, no, you're going to get off that boat. But they decided to stay on the boat and they went back to slavery. But again, you see, I was telling you guys earlier, there are people who were in the United States, or what we call the United States now, who are scattered about the Caribbean. They have foundational Black American roots. So it's a real jumbled up story, you know, and that's why we have to talk about this in the context of how you identify culturally. But nevertheless, on April 16, 1842, some time later, the British authorities, they freed 17 of the 19 men who had led the revolt, and 2 had already died in custody, and that made a total of about 128 people. 100 free. That was the Black people freed about by this was 128, and 128 people free. You know, not by paperwork, not by negotiation, not by abolitionists and petitions, but by bravery and tactical genius of this one man named Madison Washington. And there's no other recorded slave rebellion in American history with a higher number of successful liberations. Okay? So again, remember, even in chains, we found a way to be free. All right, now I'm gonna tell you something. Everybody always talks about Black people, especially when you talk to them. They talk about how they got a little Cherokee in them. Somebody type Cherokee, Apache. Y'all got a little Apache in you, huh? Did you all know that the Native Americans had their own slaves, and invariably they had rebellions too? Did y'all know that? Well, I'm gonna tell you about one. Okay, let me know. You guys still with me? Hit the number 1 button if you will. Still with me? Let me know. This was the fall of 1842, deep in Indian territory. This is modern day Oklahoma, just a couple of hours north of where I am. Okay. This rebellion unfolded within the Cherokee Nation, because the Cherokee, the 5 civilized tribes, they had slaves too. They had Black slaves. Okay. The Cherokee people had adopted many of the practices of the American South. In fact, they fought on the side of the Confederacy against the North to hold on to their slaves. And it wasn't just 1 or 2. They had hundreds of Black men, women, and children that they held in bondage by the native elites, who had themselves been forcibly removed from their ancestral lands during the Trail of Tears just a few years ago. So imagine this. We always talk about the Trail of Tears, but you know who they forced to come with them? The hundreds of Black men, women, and children that they held in bondage. So before you start feeling all sorry for the Native Americans, understand that they themselves were your oppressor. In this sense, I just want you to understand that. When you start really looking at history, it is a nasty, topsy-turvy tale. But either way, on November 15, 1842, it was a group of Black people, about 25 to 30, and they rose up and they armed themselves with stolen rifles and pistols, and they executed a well-organized escape plan. Their goal was to get down to Mexico, because Mexico, slavery had been abolished about a decade earlier in 1833, okay? And the Indians and the Mexicans didn't really get along, and they had Black folk knew that was a free place, a free country. So Mexico had become a beacon for fugitive slaves from Texas, okay? Texas, Louisiana, and Indian Territory, they'd all go down to Mexico, all right? All they had to do was reach the Red River and cross into Mexican territory, and they would finally be free. So the escape party included both. They included men, women, children, and as they moved southward through the wilderness, they liberated more Black folk, people who along the way. And so the numbers began to swell. And it was the largest mass escape attempt among enslaved people held by native slaveholders in the U.S. But unfortunately, freedom is not within reach. You see, the Cherokee authorities, the Native Americans, right, deeply embedded in their social order and now mirrored the Southern plantation society. They saw the escape as a threat to their sovereignty and their economy. They needed black people to do their work. They don't ever talk about this, okay? So what they did was they got together a militia force, and it was led by some white slave catchers and some Cherokee enforcers, and they quickly assembled to hunt our people down. And after days of pursuit, these rebels were, our people, who they call rebels, were overtaken before they could get to the Mexican border. And it was a violent confrontation that followed. Several black people were killed on the spot. Others were captured and brought back to Cherokee, the Cherokee capital. Shout out to Johnny Harris. And their resistance made it into a spectacle to deter others. Okay, in the 1842 rebellion, it sent shockwaves through the Cherokee Nation. So whether you white or you black, whether you Native American or whatever, black folks was fighting everybody to get free. We were fighting to get free. You see, black people saw freedom wherever we were enslaved, even behind tribal borders. Okay, now I want to talk to you guys about something else, and I think I kind of mentioned this earlier. So Spain had established control over vast regions of what we know as America. And in the early phases of the American colonialization, Spain established control over places like Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, and just generally the broader Gulf Coast. Now, here's the difference between Spain. Unlike the English, they imposed a strict racial boundaries in their colonies, okay? The Spanish colonial system was structured more around religion as opposed to race. And this orientation was deeply shaped by Spain's recent historical trauma, right? The Reconquista, which culminated in 1492 when the Christian forces expelled the Muslim Moors who had been there for 800 years of Islamic rule. So as a result, Spain became especially vigilant regarding religious identity, particularly non-Christian, and Catholicism became the central test for inclusion or exclusion in Spanish society. In other words, they didn't really care what color you were as long as you were Catholic. See, the Europeans coming from Northern Europe, i.e. the British, they might have been beefing with the Irish and the Scottish and whoever else over on that side of the pond. But when they got over here, it was more important that they were white. They didn't care what religion you were. We had to maintain this racial line. So whether you was a black Christian, a black Muslim, or whatever, you were still part of that racial caste. Okay? Go give me some more water. Come on, you want to say hi to everybody? All right, go get daddy some water. I appreciate that. My little assistant there, give me some water. Jelly jar. But anyway, so again, this religious framework, it allowed for a greater degree of racial fluidity in the Spanish colonies and their Anglo counterparts. And Africans, mixed race, under certain circumstance, they attain their freedom, land, and status, but only if they converted to Catholicism and pledged loyalty to the Spanish crown. Shout out to Hologram EMC. So starting in 1600 and 1700, enslaved Africans escaping harsh conditions. Thank you, son. I appreciate you. Okay, thank you. Say bye. All right, thank you. All right, but anyway, like I said, and we talked about this earlier, the word on the curve to the black folks in Georgia, South Carolina, or whatever, hey, just run on down there. You can, enslaved Africans understood that we can escape to Georgia. We can these harsh conditions that they have in Georgia and South Carolina, they began going south to Spanish Florida. You see, they found asylum, they found opportunity. And And the Spanish government promised freedom to any enslaved African who embraced Catholicism and served in the Spanish military. And this policy culminated in the creation of Fort Mose in 1738. And this is just north of St. Augustine. And the first legally recognized free black settlement in what would become the United States. And this unique convergence of religious tolerance and African resistance and Spanish geopolitics is set the stage for future conflicts. In the ensuing decades, they were running down there. Fugitive slaves, free blacks, Native American groups, particularly the Seminoles, they formed powerful alliances in Florida. They blended cultures, they resisted U.S. expansion, and these alliances would later draw the ire of the American slaveholder population. Keep in mind, I want y'all to understand something. This is 1800 something, okay? You got black folk running down here since 1738, running to what was at that time Spain. All of this was going on at the same time. Shout out to Lance Jackson. Shout out to Kenneth Bradford. All of this was going on at the same time. You had all this slavery going on in America, and you got all these black folk running down here to Florida. So what do you think had to happen? They had to confront these black people in what was called the Seminole Wars. And look, this went on from 1816 to 1858. I want you to think about that. The Civil War started in 1860, but all this was leading up. And here's the colder part about it. They never won. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. These wars fought largely over the refusal of Spain to return escaped slaves in the presence of black-led resistance in Florida. This will become such a prolonged and costly issue for the U.S. government. President Abraham Lincoln, he referred to it as the Florida problem. This is the Florida problem. Somebody typed the Florida problem. I'm not talking about Florida State or University of Florida. The Florida problem. It's an SEC joke. This is a Florida problem. That's what LSU says. This is damn University of Florida. But this is a Florida problem. And the early Spanish, shout out to Trip D, the early Spanish colonial model unintentionally, it sowed the seeds of multi-generational resistance movement and deeply embedded in Black, Native, and Spanish colonial history. That it would challenge the expansionism well into the 19th century. You can't expand in Florida. You see? These Seminole Wars, it was the longest war against Black and Native freedom. It was long. Here's what you got to understand. In the dark swamps is where these folk would hide. Amongst the humid pine forests of Florida. It was one of the most extraordinary resistance movements in American history. And the story has been buried beneath this patriotic myth. This was not just Native American uprising. It was a multi-racial rebellion forged in blood and desperation between the Seminole Indians and the Black folk who had escaped slavery. And they refused to return to bondage. And what was the U.S. government's response? It was a full-scale military campaign that lasted 40 years. You hear me? And it cost millions of dollars back when the U.S. didn't have millions of dollars. And it ultimately failed to break their spirit. Look, do you hear me? They spent 40 years fighting this war and couldn't win. And you telling me you going against a couple of thousand Black folk and some Indians, and you telling me you gonna put 35 million foundational Black Americans out this country? Please. If we want to get back to the subject that we're talking about, you understand me? These black folk that ran down from South Carolina and Georgia and North Carolina and ran down there and said, you ain't coming to get us. It's how it started. It started from what's called the First Seminole War from 1816 to 1819. And guess who was the Army general? Andrew Jackson, the man who would later become the 7th president of the United States. Jackson claimed he was entering Spanish Florida to stop the Seminole raids and recover fugitive slaves. So here's what was going on. The Bloods wouldn't just stay down there. They wouldn't just stay down there and run to Miami and take a boat to Cuba. What they would do is they would cross the border into Florida. Then they would come back up. They would raid Georgia. They would free more black people. They would then turn around and burn up plantations and steal supply, then go back to Florida. So Andrew Jackson, they sent him down there and said, you got to do something about that. You got to get down there. Matter of fact, they used Georgia. Georgia was supposed to be an all-white state. You understand? So they could distinguish what it was a buffer state between South Carolina and Florida. You understand? But nevertheless, the truth is they said they were going down there to stop these fugitive slave raids. But the truth is he was going to go down there and put an end to this thriving black and native communities that pose an existential threat to the Southern slave economy. These settlements represented freedom, they represented autonomy, and armed resistance. Everything the slaveholding South feared the most. One of Jackson's first targets was a place called Negro Fort, and it was along. I'm gonna get the Appalachia, Appalachola. Where my Florida people at? Apalachicola River, and it was manned by around 300 formerly enslaved black people. They were in black Seminoles. You know what I'm saying? And the fort had been supplied with British arms after the War of 1812, and Jackson wanted that destroyed. And a single cannonball ignited the powder magazine, and it killed nearly everybody there. Over 270 people, mostly black men, women, and children. It was a massacre, and it sent a clear message that black freedom would not be tolerated by the U.S. government. And so then Jackson then invaded Spanish Florida, and without congressional approval, mind you, this was a separate country at the time. This is like invading Mexico. You're not supposed to invade a foreign country unless you get approval from Congress, but he did it anyway. Without congressional approval, he invaded Spain or Spanish territory. He executed British citizens accused of aiding the Seminoles, and he set the stage for Spain to relinquish Florida through what was known as the Adams-Onis Treaty of 1819. But he hadn't won anything because the resistance continued. Okay? It was quiet, it was mobile, and it was determined. So the second Seminole War happened. All right? It wasn't something continuous. It was the second one. You can't sustain wars longer than 3 or 4 years. These soldiers need to go home. They get injured. You trying to take people's lives. That's a hard fight. You're trying to take their lives and their livelihood, and they're fighting you hard. It didn't work out like that. You see? But again, the second Seminole War. So what happened here, the U.S. government tried to forcibly relocate the Seminole Indians to what is now Oklahoma. This is between 1835 and 1842. And this time the resistance was even stronger. This was led by a chief named Chief Osceola, okay? Osceola, all right? And the thing is, he had the unwavering support of black Seminoles and the fugitive slaves. They turned Florida's wilderness into a battlefield of guerrilla warfare. Keeping in mind, these black folk had been running down here for over a century now. So not only were they black Seminoles, they were literally black. They were black and Indian, you see? But they fought a guerrilla war. The United States government invaded Florida with over 3,000 troops. They made that was the largest Indian war in U.S. history, but you don't hear anything about it. They have stuff like they call it the Dade Massacre, the Battle of Okeechobee. And what it did was it revealed the limits of the American army. Because see, despite having overwhelming numbers, the army couldn't crush the resistance. You even after Osceola was treacherously, captured under a flag of truce in 1837. All right. Basically said, hey, we want peace. And then they went and did some trickery and took it over. But still, many of the black and native fighters, they vanished into the Everglades. And they lived there freely and defiantly outside of the U.S. control. And by the war's end, they spent the equivalent of nearly $1 billion today, and they got nothing. You understand what I'm saying? They spent nearly $1 billion. Shout out to Liliana. $1 billion, and they got nada. Zero. So this is a problem. This is going on 4 decades. So they came back again in 1855. This is 3 years before the Civil War. This is a final attempt to eliminate this bastion of black and native solidarity. And it failed again. The remaining fighters still refused to be subdued, and they continued to frustrate and embarrass the U.S. military. And behind all of this was Andrew Jackson. This man had been fighting this battle for 40 years. He was the architect of what became a genocidal Indian policy, his Indian Removal Act of 1830 and his earlier military campaigns. It wasn't just about land. They're about destroying the space where black freedom could thrive. Jackson viewed the Native Americans as savages and the Africans as a threat to white power. And together, they were a nightmare for the Southern slave owner. And this is the story of the Seminole Indian Wars, not as an obscure footnote in Native American history, but this was a central chapter in the first fight for black freedom. It's the story of how formerly enslaved Africans displaced Native people stood together, bled together, and resisted together. And it is a reminder that even when outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded, freedom is going to fight back. Now, here's the thing. What's the legacy behind this? Huh? What's the legacy behind that? So I need you to understand something. They had been fighting these people in Florida for 40 years, and they didn't win. And now we are on the cusp of the Civil War. They said, leave that alone. We got other fish to fry. So now the Civil War has happened. It's 1861. You still got these black folk and these Seminoles held out in the Everglades, never been defeated, never fully removed. You can't beat them. Abraham Lincoln himself, he referred to this long-running battle as the Florida problem. It's an embarrassment. It costs a lot. You're supposed to be one of the greatest nations in America, and you can't beat a bunch of ragtag Negroes and Indians. And now you want to fight the South and take their slaves away? Huh? Imagine being Abraham Lincoln. And it's the early 1860s. You probably have little belief in your military, right? Imagine that. Keep in mind, they didn't have any black folks fighting in their military at that time. And in fact, when you look at the history of the Civil War, it wasn't until they start letting black men into the military that they actually start winning. They should already have known they couldn't beat us. That's why they couldn't do much with those black Seminoles down in Florida. But imagine being president. It's 1860. You standing at the helm of a fractured nation. You staring down the barrel of civil war amid rising tensions over slavery, and the memory of Florida is in your mind like, can my military even do this? It's not as a geographical concern, but as a symbolic one. The Seminole Wars, 40 years, a long conflict that saw the United States government throw away thousands of troops because along with the millions of dollars fighting what seemingly is an invisible enemy, there's no victory. All you got was humiliation. And these weren't even formal armies, and you're about to fight the American South. If you look at all of the military schools, most of them in the South, you couldn't beat. These weren't trained soldiers from foreign nations. They were Native Americans and formerly enslaved black people and couldn't even read. Lightly armed, scattered throughout the swamps, no backwoods, no nothing, no training, and they remained undefeated against your well-trained army. This, you understand, is what makes Florida so terrifying. These were people who had every reason to give up, to surrender, to run, yet they didn't. And the Black Seminoles, born of bondage and driven by a singular fire of freedom, fought back. They built lives in the shadows of the Everglades. They carved communities out of wilderness, and they refused to bend to the might of the United States Army. Not once, not twice, but across 3 wars over 40 years. Shout out to Adon Devine. And as Lincoln, you recognize the larger lesson. Slavery is not sustainable, not simply because it's morally wrong, but because the enslaved will not stay enslaved. The Florida problem isn't just a military failure, it's a warning. You see, plainly, and it's clear, if black people in one state could resist for 40 years and the United States military never make any headway, and we talk about a couple thousand, then what does that mean if you got black people across the country? And in 1860, it was about 40 million of us. Black people across the country, they could bring this entire system crashing down. The plantation economy depends on the consumption and docility. That's the only way it works. But Florida proved something dangerous. The black resistance is real, is organized, and is capable of defying the empire. You see? And here we thought we had broken these people with all of our tactics. So put yourself in Lincoln's position. Emancipation becomes not just a political tool or a moral imperative. It becomes a strategic necessity to maintain the Union, to avoid economic collapse, to prevent insurrection from spreading like wildfire. The country must eventually free these black people, okay? Because the cost of keeping them in chains financially, militarily, morally is too great. You can't imprison people who've proven they're willing to die rather than return to bondage. And so the legacy of the Florida problem then is more than regional. It's revolutionary. It laid bare the limits of of American power when confronted with the unstoppable force of human dignity. The Black Seminoles, descendants of Africans who rejected both the lash and the auction block, stood as a living prophecy of what was to come. And our defiance foretold the coming storm, the Civil War itself, a war not only about preserving the Union, but about reckoning with a centuries-old lie that slavery could ever truly be enforced. See, in their mud-soaked forts and camouflage trails, black folk and the Indians fought not only for themselves, but for every enslaved person in America. And when black Americans today say they fought for freedom, they meant it. We mean it. And we mean it literally. The story of Florida is the story of resistance. The resistance resistance, Lincoln comes to understand, is the seed of liberty. And so these wars are rarely taught. Nobody saw you. This is probably the first time many of you all had somebody go this deep into this. Nobody teaches, but it remains one of the most striking examples of successful Black resistance in North American history. The Black Seminoles, many of whom would later be relocated to what's called Indian Territory and even Mexico, they left behind a legacy of defiance, military skill, and unbreakable solidarity that reshaped the American South and delayed U.S. expansion for decades. We messed up the money. Okay? So what I need you all to understand is this. I just talked about America, okay? And of course, when people speak about slavery, when we talk about America, especially in America, we frame it as though it was some sort of passive condition and Black folks suffering silently under white domination. Oh, boss master. That was all just the game. It was a very different story. You see? Because see, slave rebellions erupted in the all across America, but you also had stuff going on across the Caribbean and Central America and South America and Brazil, in the jungles of Jamaica. It wasn't just in the sugar cane fields of the Carolinas and Louisiana. The first Maroon War in 1728 and 17 through 1739, 11 years. In Jamaica, you had all this dense mountain. I know y'all don't really go up to the dense mountains of Jamaica. Y'all hang out on the beach in Montego Bay and Ocho Rios. That blue sand and that blue water and that white sand. But you had escaped Black people, the Maroons. They called it, that's what they call it. They called it the Maroons. You had women, this woman they call Queen Nanny, okay? The Windward Maroons. They launched a guerrilla war against the British, burned all their plantations, freed more Black people, humiliated the Red Coat forces. They did it for a decade. And basically the British had to beg for peace. They end up granting these Black people called the Maroon, get granted them land and autonomy. This is a Black woman did this. It was the first time, this is 1739. It's the first time an African descended group in America forced European empire to formally treaty. And at the very time, the U.S. colonists were beginning to entrench slavery in the Carolinas and Georgia. Jamaica's Black fighters were winning independence in the mountains. In 1733, they had something called the St. John Revolt in the Danish Virgin Islands. And this is 4 years into the Maroon War. You had an enclave of Ancon warriors in the Danish Virginia Islands. They revolted and took over the entire island of St. John. They executed all the white planters and fortified the territory. They held on to it for 6 months until Denmark and France combined military forces and they came in. It wasn't just an uprising, it was a full-scale seizure of European colonial property by Black folks. These were not helpless people. These weren't helpless victims. They were highly organized and militarily capable people with long memories of African warfare. What about Zumba's rebellion? This is in the 17th century Brazil. And did you all know that the majority of Africans on the Western Hemisphere are in Brazil? Not America, not the Caribbean, but Brazil. This is well before the U.S. even existed. There was a man named Ganga Zumba. He was a Congolese prince. He led one of the most successful, sustained African communities in the America. It was in Palmares, the Maroon Society. It lasted 100 years. This man had he had a whole kingdom. He had kings. He had a line of kings. He had ambassadors. He had armies. He had treaties with European powers. This wasn't a camp. It was a nation of free Black people in the heart of Brazil. It was eventually destroyed by the Portuguese. Its legacy showed that Black power, African governance, and independence could strive even under the nose of colonial rule. This man had a palace in Brazil. You understand me? Wives, offspring, a line of kings. In the highlands of Veracruz, it's Mexico, 1609, before America was America. Before they brought the first slaves to the United States in 1619, Mexico already had slavery. And there was a man in the highlands of Veracruz, his name was Gaspar Yanga. He was a royal descendant from Gabon. And he led decades-long resistance against the Spanish authorities. And his maroon colony grew so powerful that the Spanish couldn't defeat it militarily. So in 1618, they made it a deal. They gave him freedom in exchange for peace. And Yanga founded what's called San Lorenzo de los Negros, the first officially recognized black town in the Americas. Today it still bears a name, Yanga. In over 200 years from before Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, black people in Mexico had already secured their liberation from through force and diplomacy. Did you see what I'm trying to explain to you? Hit the number 1 button. Hit the doggone number 1 button. White people, educated white people, know that this is going on. They know that these are the same black people that we got from Africa and brought here. They can do the same thing here that they did in Mexico, that they did in Haiti, that they did in Brazil, that they did in the Caribbean. This is what I want you to understand the context. And we don't even want to talk about the Haitian Revolution. This is considered the pinnacle of slave revolts. The Haitian Revolution shook the very foundation of white supremacy, led by former slave Toussaint Louverture and Jean-Jacques Dessalines and Henry Christophe. They defeated Spain, Britain. The Haitians defeated Spain, Britain, and Napoleon's France in succession. By 1804, Haiti had become the first black republic in the Western Hemisphere, the only country born of successful race. So here, I want you to think about what Lincoln is thinking about. Look, damn, we got Florida, and if you get past Florida, you got Jamaica, then you got Haiti. Damn. These N-words are freeing themselves all across the Americas. And we got all kind of we got Nat Turner, can you imagine the fear on these white folk mind? Look, let me explain something. So from the jungles of Jamaica to the sugarcane fields of Brazil and cotton plantations of the Carolina, black folk fought back. They resisted in every way imaginable. Rebellion, they ran off, flight, sabotage, assassination, full-scale war. These rebellions weren't isolated. Word spread quickly through the grapevine of sailors and runaways and missionaries. Word got around. Black folks in the Americas knew about one another. They carried their languages and their warrior traditions and their spiritual beliefs. Carried it with them. They never forgot who we were. We never forgot who we were. We might have been enslaved in these American colonies, being brutalized and raped and terrorized. And they're also watching and listening and hearing stories about black uprisings from the Caribbean to the Cherokee Nation to the Central America to South America, slave ships to the Caribbeans. Word traveled fast. It was a global network of resistance, a spiritual and political echo that empowered enslaved people from Georgia to Ghana. These weren't minor uprisings. These were wars that shook entire empires, entire colonial governments collapsed. Armies were defeated. Treaties were signed, not with kings, but with formerly enslaved men and women who had carved out their own kingdoms in foreign lands. What does that mean? Shout out to Money Motion. What does that mean? It means that slavery was never secure, that there was nowhere safe for these white supremacists. Okay, plantation owners lived in fear because the people they enslaved were not broken, not defeated, and not silent. They were warriors, often from royal lineages, trained in African warfare and driven by righteous fury. And so to these white colonizers, the dangers was clear. Nowhere is safe. Again, they had over 300 rebellions in North America alone. I'm not even talking about what happened in the South American, Central American slave ships. These black rebellions proved that slavery was never truly secure. Not on the island, not in the backwoods, not even in fortified cities. And this deep, lasting fear of black rage, of black intelligence, and of black solidarity, it haunted every slave owner, every society, every white supremacist out here. They can talk tough if they want to, but it's the reason why these laws were so harsh, why weapons were restricted from black folk, why reading was forbidden. It's the reason why y'all think that reading and education is lame. You call our most educated group, y'all call them lames, don't you? Call them educated lames, right? He don't do it for me. That's what the lady said. He don't do it for me. All of these rebellions were led by these educated black men, at least for their time. I want you to think about that. You always put so much emphasis on these thugs and these lowlifes and these scallywags out here sweet talking you out of your good stuff. But the true rebels amongst us are the educated, whether we talk about blacksmiths or whether we talking about the drivers or whether we talking about preachers like Nat Turner. Think about that. But nevertheless, it was, look here. Look, listen. It was fear, pure and simple. It was fear. All the stuff these white folk been doing or were doing, that was fear. They were moving out of fear. That's why the laws got so harsh. That's why they made the laws harsh right now in 2025, because of fear of losing their country, fear of being surrounded. Nevertheless, what you need to understand, when black folk fought for our freedom, we meant it. You see? We mean it with fire, with blood, with tragedy, with sacrifice. And the world has never been the same since. So when we say foundational black Americans fought for our freedom, understand this. We weren't waiting for Lincoln. We weren't waiting for abolitionists. We weren't waiting for some white savior to come save us. We weren't waiting for anybody. We fought, we died, we won battles, and in some places we built nations, and we were never alone. Now, the violence that never left. This is what I need you to understand. See, the use of violence or the looming threat of it by foundational black Americans, it did not end with the abolition of slavery. If anything, it evolved. It adapted to the times. It remains a tool of survival, of resistance, and in some cases, the righteous retribution. But shout out to JR, but contrary to what, I'm not here to fearmonger, okay? You see? You see? And I'm not here to evoke this Southern racist paranoia. Most black people, either the formerly enslaved from 100 years ago to the black people right now, are not interested in vengeance. You see? We want something far more human. Especially back then, they want a reconnection with their family. They wanted peace. They wanted freedom. Even right now, black folk just want white folk to leave them alone. Stop building highways through our communities and unlawfully locking us up. That's what we want. We want you to leave us alone. But here's the thing. So we're going to skip forward a little bit. So now we're going to go after, and I want you to check this out. This is important. Y'all look at this first.
What's on your mind, Marcus?
Kill white men. Didn't you, TJ?
Yeah.
How many? Told me. 2, 3, know of. In the war in Germany?
Yeah.
Why are we afraid now? Y'all crazy. I was in the war. I fought hard for my country. I was a tank commander. Archie, you and TJ served together in Kobe?
I fought in the first war.
Kill white men. did. You remember Double V? What it meant to Negro soldier? Victory abroad, victory at home, victory against oppression, racism.
I'm with you, Marcus.
What happened to that victory? What you suggested, sir? I suggested we defend ourselves. We take night shifts at the plant so we can watch over our children when they march in the program.
Now, for you all who don't know, I don't know if you can hear this, but this is a movie called The Deacons of Defense. The Deacons of Defense. Have you all ever heard of that? The Deacons of Defense. That's what this is. Okay, and that's Forrest Whitaker. And some of you all have seen it. Yeah, it's The Deacons of Defense. Okay, but we're gonna talk about that too. Y'all still with me? Hit the number 1 button if you're learning something. Let me know you're learning something. Okay, if you're learning something, let me know you're learning something. Okay. All right. Hit the number 1 button if you're learning something. Let me know you're learning something. I need to know. All right. Now, here's the thing. Here's the thing. So the civil we were gonna get free. We were too hard to hold. Okay. We were gonna get our freedom. So they had to come up with something else. So we're going to skip past the Civil War. You guys know how that ended, right? But in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War, you had hundreds of thousands of Black Americans that left the plantation, not in rage, but in search of lost family. Husbands sought out wives, sold off years early. Mothers looked for their children. They've been forced to leave behind. Brothers tried to find their brothers and cousins and such. And these journeys across the South were deeply emotional and often dangerous. Yeah, not this one, not this. Not this. Don't worry about it. Come over here. Come over here. Say hi to everybody. Hello. Look at my handsome son back there. He's driving now. You hear me talking, screaming at the internet? Yes. Am I loud? No. I don't believe you. I am loud. All right, big man. I'll see you later. Thank you, son. It's the anyway. Okay, I'm back. All right. What was I at? Okay, so we had got separated during slavery, and we started marching around the South looking for our family members. You understand me? That's what we're looking for. We're trying to reunite. Okay. After centuries of brutalization, we're just looking for peace. You see? Nevertheless, there should be no surprise that some Black men confronted some of their former slave owners. Some physically, some violently. These weren't acts of savagery, but it's just human rage and frustration. Did I miss somebody? Hold on a minute. I think I missed somebody. Shout out to Solomon 321. Thank you so much. My little boy had me distracted. Thank you so much for that super chat. Okay, I'm gonna read all the super chats, but I'm in my bag right now, so you guys gotta let me go ahead and finish this out. I gotta get this all out. Okay, I'll be finished with it in a little while. I'm not gonna hold you here all night. I know you all have things to do. I just think this is important. We are reemerging. We're talking about foundational Black Americans. We're talking about our lineage and our legacy. Well, this is it. This is a huge component of our lineage and our legacy. Okay, because people like to come over here and misinterpret our history. You see, like the brother was saying, listen to the brother speak. Listen to the brother. Okay? Talk to him, brother.
When you Black immigrants say things like this, it just shows how much you don't know about Black American history and how much of white American propaganda you've been slurping up. All my Black immigrants, just for the record, we're going to say this for the record. Black Americans are the only groups of Blacks in the whole entire world that are still dealing with the oppressors. We didn't run and we have not been defeated. Just in case you forgot, that's very important for you to understand. So what I think it is, I don't think a lot of y'all understand how high the racial tension was between Black America and white America after slavery.
You see that? Now I just laid the foundation. You see how hot it was? Them people didn't want to let us go. Lincoln knew he had to let us go. He said if I could preserve the Union without freeing the slaves, I would, but he had to free us because we were going to tear this country up trying to get free. You understand what I'm saying? Is it all beginning to come? This is the racial climate. They had to let us go. They had to. Okay? So let the brother keep speaking.
Jim Crow, the Toulouse massacres, dealing with the KKKs, police brutality. Why you think we started the Black Panther Party? Why you think we had them guns out in the white boy's head ready to unload? It just in case a pig got out of line. You know what I'm saying? What you think that was about? I'll even argue this. The reason why they even let you other black groups in here, you other black immigrants into this country, is because you guys were brought here to be a more docile group of blacks. They knew the tension between Black America and white America was too high, that they got to bring somebody in here who are going to work the jobs and for cheap and who are going to comply because you guys were desperate. You Haitians, you Jamaicans.
And I want you to keep in mind, they didn't let the revolutionaries come to the country. There's a screening process, okay? There's a screening process. The reason why these open borders scared the bejesus out of some of these folk, you don't know who's coming up in here. There's a screening process. All right, let's keep listening to the brother.
You Africans, you guys are coming from failed countries and failed islands, and you're just looking for work. We were not that desperate. We was putting belt to ass, and it was going to continue. So if you want to ask why,
belt to booty. Now, technically, ass is a word used in the Bible, okay? As in the jawbone of an ass. Hallelujah. So that's technically not, that's still family friendly. For all my folk who are concerned about the use of profanities, ass is a word used by the Lord. Okay, praise God. So let's continue. Continue, brother.
we are not as aggressive, or why we're not as aggressive with white folks, is because you're in the way. If you were to get out the way, it'll be a different story.
So he know what he's talking about. But anyway, so there's a lot of street fights going on. The Union Army was stationed in the South, so some brothers decided to get some get back. And these moments were fueled by generations of pain, But for the most part, black folk just wanted to be left alone. They just wanted to move on. Now, Reconstruction lasted from 1865, which is the end of the Civil War, to 1877. All right, and this kind of kept the white vigilante forces at bay. Okay, there was no overseers, no guns, no sheriffs in the pockets of the planters, no lynch mobs, unafraid of reprisal. Black folk had a brief window that allowed for some scores to be settled, but more importantly, it fractured the old Southern caste system in ways that terrified the former slaveholders. As a historian, Mr. Eric Fonner notes, in Reconstruction, America's unfinished revolution, the post-war period shook the very foundations of Southern society. For the first time, black men could vote, own land, run for office, walk tall, often for the first time in their lives. The psychological shift alone was revolutionary. Okay? Now here's the problem. It didn't last. See, in 1877, in a backroom deal between some Northern Republicans and some Southern Dixiecrats, there was something that took place called the Compromise of 1877, and effectively, it ended Reconstruction. Okay, and in exchange for conceding the presidency to Rutherford B. Hayes, it was a big discrepancy, and they it was like they said, look, Republicans agreed to withdraw federal troops from the South, and that decision abandoned Black Americans to the mercy of these white supremacists and their violence. And so basically, with the Union troops being removed, okay, what started was another blood-soaked chapter of American history. And this was the rise of white terror, okay? Now, we already talked about what we did during slavery. This is before we were allowed to have guns, before we could read and all that. So these white folk would have you believe, right, that this Ku Klux Klan, basically what happened, shout out to 45 minutes. What stepped into the vacuum was this white supremacist ideology, this Ku Klux Klan idea. We're going to put these blacks back in their place. All right. It was founded in Pulaski, Tennessee in 1865 by a former Confederate officer. Okay. And their aim was it wasn't simply to intimidate. It was to reestablish white supremacy and restore the racial pecking order. All right. That slavery maintained. Because see, slavery, let me tell you something about racism. Racism is a made up ideology, and it's done to make white folks feel better about the dirt that they do to black and brown people. Their Judeo-Christian value system tells them that you have to treat all men as equal. But if they can deem you to be an animal or less than or something like that, then they don't have to treat you equal, and they don't have to treat you like a human being. And so the racism, I'm better than you, came about to justify their feelings of guilt. You see what I'm saying? So that's something else we'd have to talk about. But the bottom line is the Klan, what made the Klan dangerous, because they practiced this psychological warfare, guerrilla warfare. They'd roll up on people's houses and, firebomb them and scare your children and stuff like that. Because remember, houses are spread all about. But what made them especially dangerous was their mastery of this fear is theater. Knowing the black folk were uneducated, mostly deeply religious, and steeped in spiritual folklore, the Klan designed itself to resemble ghosts of Confederate dead. Okay, they were clad up in white sheets and pointed hoods. They rode on horsebacks through black communities at night, burning homes and lynching leaders and sowing panic. And this terror was a performance. It worked. They pretended to be haints. Okay, a haint is what old folk in Mississippi used to call ghosts. I remember my grandma used to refer to them as haints. Haints, not hants. If you hear any intellectual tell you that the ghosts, that the Ku Klux Klan or the Cuckoo Klan were trying to be like hants, that means that they do not know what they're talking about. Haints is the proper terminology that the old folk used to use down in Mississippi. Nevertheless, there's another scholar. Her name is Elaine Parsons, and she wrote a book called The Ku Klux Klan, The Birth of the Klan during Reconstruction. The white costume and the ritualistic behavior of the Klan were calculated to exploit the fears of the newly freed black people. They turned superstition into a weapon of control, and the goal was clear: to make people afraid again. You see? Now, of course, people with good sense knew what it was, but it definitely there to scare women and children. Okay, and the ones who were fearful at heart. Keep in mind, a lot of these black men had fought in the Civil War on behalf of the Union, so they had unalived some of these Confederates. I need you to understand that. See, they always try to paint this picture. Oh, these poor black people were so afraid until they're able to draw down on you with a pistol or a gun or a rifle. You see what I'm saying? Nevertheless, let's get back to it. The Klan, the other white supremacist group like the White League and the Red Shirts, they weren't just vigilantes, they were political actors. Their aim was to suppress black vote and destroy Reconstruction governments and resurrect this racial caste system. And this was named Jim Crow. Jim Crow was originally a song, and the song became a label for these unfair laws, okay? But what happened was night by night, county by county, they went about restoring this power dynamic, okay? And they momentarily disrupted emancipation. Schools were burned, churches were bombed, black elected officials were assassinated, all while the federal government looked the other way, okay? So yes, there were moments of black retribution during Reconstruction. There were instances where the long-suffering brothers and sisters struck back, but these were the exceptions, not the rule. The vast majority of formerly enslaved people simply wanted to live and be reunited, but these white folk wouldn't leave them alone. You see what I'm saying? They wanted to come back with it. So now what happens? What happens is what always happens. Resistance to retaliation. And so here's the thing, okay? The terror didn't stop, and neither did the resistance. Now, most Americans are taught about Dr. Martin Luther King's peaceful marches and Rosa Parks quietly sitting in defiance in the back of the bus. Okay. What's almost entirely absent from the national narrative is that much of the civil rights movement survival depended on black men with guns. You understand me? The nonviolent face of the movement was often only possible because violence, righteousness, organized and strategic self-defense stood right behind it, watching from the rear. See, this is the part they don't teach you in school, do they? Tell the truth. This is what they don't teach you in school. They don't want you to hear any parts of this. And I'm not a person that's advocating violence. I do believe in protecting your family and protecting yourself from knuckleheads and fools out there and anybody else who wants to take your life. All right? But you definitely have an obligation under God's law to protect yourself. So after the withdrawal of the federal troops and the rise of Jim Crow laws and black folks were subjected to a new century of terrorism, lynchings, arson, mob attacks, state-sanctioned police brutality. KKK didn't disappear, it evolved. And in 1910, again, it showed up again in 1950, and it's in the bloodstream of America, you see? But unlike the first Reconstruction era, this time black folk didn't just take it, all right? So now we want to talk about the Deacons of Defense, okay? And the original purpose of Deacons of Defense, right? This is a forgotten vanguard of armed black resistance. Now, I graduated from Grambling State University, and I do remember a little town called Jonesboro, Louisiana. I actually had to drive over to Jonesboro, Louisiana, and I had to pay a water bill or something like that. So little did I know that Jonesboro, Louisiana, in the sweltering summer of 1964, was the height. This was the height of the civil rights movement, and this little rural town in North Louisiana became the cradle of the most militant black self-defense group in American history, called the Deacons of Defense and Justice. Unlike Selma, Montgomery over there in Alabama, Jonesboro wasn't a national flashpoint. It was a forgotten battleground where the fight for black dignity and survival played out, far from television cameras. Now, a lot of folk in New York and a lot of folk on the West Coast, y'all just swearing down. Y'all are just the toughest things out there. Can you imagine being in Jonesboro, Louisiana? I want you to imagine Jonesboro. Jonesboro, Louisiana is about halfway from one end of the Louisiana state line and the other end, okay? You can drive from Dallas, Texas to Jackson, Louisiana on I-20. And if you drive, let's say east or west on I-20, you will come across the Jonesboro exit. And little do you know, this is where it all started. All your Black Panther, all that started right here, okay? That's what I need you to understand. You will fly by this place and not notice it like it would be as insignificant to you as a fly on a cow's butt in a pasture 100 yards off the highway. You won't even notice it. But this is American history. I want y'all to understand that, okay? Now, what you need to understand is the racial climate. It was going on in the American South. It was terror under color of law. It was legal for them to do this. Because see, at the time, the Jim Crow South, it still ruled large swaths of Louisiana with an iron fist. Segregation wasn't just legal, it was brutally enforced by both private citizens and public officials. Okay, local governments in places like Jonesboro often operated in open collaboration with white supremacist groups, particularly the Ku Klux Klan. And the Klan didn't wear their hoods. In the shadows here, they patrolled the streets. They burned the crosses in the front yards, and they assassinated people with impunity, knowing full well the police, the prosecutors, the judges, and the juries were probably all either members or sympathizers. I want you to keep in mind, this is 1964. Remember, you had black folk leaving the South. They was running out of Detroit. They was getting the hell out of the South. They were going to Louisiana, leaving Louisiana, going to Oakland, going to Los Angeles, going to Detroit, Chicago. All right, it was nothing left but the black folks who said, we not running, we fighting. This is what I want you to understand. it was so hard down living South that some folks said, man, I'm leaving. I'm getting out of here. But the real one stayed. And that y'all keep that in mind. You have black men and say, I'm not going anywhere. Matter of fact, we not going anywhere in the face of this onslaught of racism, overt racism, no justice here in the heart of the South in North Louisiana, heavily forested, economically depressed region. Black residents lived under daily threat of racial terror. White mobs had long used intimidation to suppress black political activity, especially voter registration drives. Okay, especially that. People's homes were firebombed. Churches were vandalized. Churches. Black men were dragged from cars and beaten the worst, and the law did nothing. So in the national consciousness, the 1964 was the year of the Civil Rights Act of Dr. King's sermon and Freedom Summer. But in the Deep South, nonviolence was a fragile experiment. The movement's philosophical leaders preached turning the other cheek. Okay, that's what the civil rights movement preached. But on the ground, in places like Jonesboro, Louisiana, cheeks were bloodied over and over again without protection or relief. Civil rights workers, many of them young and idealistic, came down from New York and all these different enclaves in the north, these liberal bastions, right? And they came down to Louisiana and under the banner of peaceful resistance. And what they encountered was sniper bullets and burning crosses and the constant sound. Shout out to Eddie Washington. Thank you so much. A constant sound of car engines rolling slowly past their homes at night. It became increasingly clear that marching and singing and sitting would not be enough, not in Jonesboro. Okay. And so the war veterans, who are we talking about? Let's talk. Where's that warrior spirit, that African warrior spirit? You saw it. Here we go. The war veterans. This is 1964. So you got war veterans. You got World War I veterans. You got World War II veterans. You got Korean War veterans. You might have a few people coming in and out of Vietnam. You had soldiers. There was one. His name was Ernest Chili Willie Thomas. Somebody type Chili Willie in the chat room. Ernest Chili Willie Thomas and his homeboy Frederick Douglass Kirkpatrick, two black men who had done something many white Americans still refuse to acknowledge. They had fought and risked their lives for the United States of America. Both of them were military veterans, part of the generation of black men who had served in World War II and the Korean War. Overseas, they had learned discipline, tactics, marksmanship, and how to command respect under fire. In foreign lands, they had been told they were fighting for freedom and democracy. But when they returned to Louisiana, they couldn't even sit at a damn lunch counter or vote without risking their lives. And they were fed up with it. They were done. So Thomas and Kilpatrick understood, these brothers understood the limits of philosophy. You understand me? They had seen men die in real war, not these shuckabuck clowns down here in North Louisiana walking around, riding around with hoods on the back of their neck. These men weren't brave. They knew it. They could see it. They knew cowards when they ran. You out here running around with sheets on you. You ain't brave. You just a coward with a gun. They recognized that what was happening in their hometown was no different than what they had seen overseas. And they weren't eager for violence, but they were no longer willing to let white supremacists hunt down our people unchecked. And so what did they do? Armed with their military training and deep community ties and unshakable sense of duty, they began organizing a local defense militia. Now keep in mind, a lot of black folks had fled the South. They had left and moved. They went to Detroit. These brothers stayed in the Deep South. I'm not talking about North Carolina and Virginia. I'm talking about Louisiana. And they call themselves the Deacons of Defense and Justice, a name that blended moral authority of the black church with strategic precision of a paramilitary unit. You understand what I'm saying? Now, why Jonesboro? Why then? Again, Jonesboro was a small, poor, and racially stratified little town. I've been there. Like I said, I paid my water bill in Jonesboro probably around about 1992 or 3. I was going to cut my water off. I had to ride over to Jonesboro and pay for that. But anyway, like many communities in the South, it was also organized. It was proud. Black residents had been agitating for their rights quietly for years. When the local black schools remained underfunded and when black businesses were harassed, when these activists who came down would begin to be targeted, there was this simmering awareness that something had to be done. And see, the town also had one other key feature. Men like Thomas and Kirkpatrick respected, they were fearless, and unwilling to let their children inherit a world of fear. Do you hear me? Shout out to GCLA. And with just a few volunteers at first, the Deacons began patrolling the neighborhoods, escorting activists, and standing guard at the civil rights meetings. So they having these peaceful civil rights meetings inside the building, and outside the building, they got these military veterans who are ready to put in that work. You understand what I'm saying? They working hand in hand. And these brothers made one thing clear. They would not shoot first, but they would shoot back. You understand me? And that declaration alone changed the dynamics of power overnight in Jonesboro. See, their philosophy was this. The group operated under the civil rights era, and the Deacons were not a civil rights organization in a traditional sense. They were a community militia of disciplined, trained, primarily veterans of World War II and the Korean War who protected civil rights workers in marches and neighborhoods using military tactics and patrols and legally obtained firearms. These men had fought for the United States in foreign wars. You see, they were patrolling black neighborhoods at night to deter white violence. They were escorting activists during protests and marches. They were using walkie-talkies and CB radios to coordinate their protection. They stood guard outside of churches and homes and organizations, never initiating violence, but prepared to retaliate if fired upon. And their presence had a profound effect. The mere rumor of armed black men being in the area was enough to get the Klan members to roll up out of there. They didn't want no parts of that. You see what I'm saying? Think about that. I want you to think about that. And you telling me you gonna deport 35 million foundational black Americans? You can't deal with 15 to 20 brothers in Jonesboro, Louisiana surrounded? Come on, man. So when these immigrant folk come tell you that we're next, make sure you tell them they tried or they would have and it didn't work. So here's what happened. Of course, this sent shockwaves through the Black South. So for the first time in living memory, it's not that it had never been done before, but in living memory, black men in Jonesboro were standing up to the Klan, not with prayers. Okay, they might have prayed, but they also had shotguns and revolvers and strategic resistance. The local Klansmen had long been accustomed to immunity. They suddenly found themselves outmaneuvered and outgunned. Other towns began calling. Chapters formed. Black veterans across the South dusted off their uniforms and answered the call. What began in Jonesboro, Louisiana, spread down to Bogalusa, Baton Rouge, and eventually dozens of other cities. And though the Deacons are often overshadowed in the civil rights history purposely, they don't want to know about that. They keep that secret. Just focus on Martin Luther King. The courage forced the federal government to take notice. Even Edward J. Hoover, the FBI director, he had to pay attention. Not just because it was a threat that they posed, but because they were winning. Here's what I want you to understand. If you ever try to do anything with any veterans, ever, I don't care what you do, you're going to be investigated. You understand what I'm saying? because our veterans, especially our black veterans, we don't give our black veterans enough credit. They have been the crown jewel of the civil rights movement throughout the history of this country. Our military guys. Shout out to the United States Marine Corps. Shout out to the United States Army. Shout out to all the cadets in the Air Force. Shout out to all the Navy personnel. Big shout out to everybody in all the armed services. You guys are the reason that the country integrated. It was the death of a military man that calls for the president of the United States to say, no, we're going to integrate the military. And that set off a cascade. You see? Because if nothing else, he understood the importance of making sure our military men are taken care of. So shout out to all the military, shout out to all the kids, shout out to all the wives who have military relatives in the armed forces, okay? But so back to the Deacons of Defense. They were born not out of hate, but out of righteous insistence that black life is worth protecting. And their formation in Jonesboro, it wasn't an aberration. It was a natural response to lawless violence. It was a last resort for a community abandoned by the state and targeted by its own neighbors. What gives white people more right to be in this country than us? And we've been here before them. That's what I want every self-respecting black person listening to me right now. What gives a lot of these white folk just got here, their relatives just got here in like 1920, 1930, 1910. Our relatives been here even before that. I want you to understand, they don't have any more right to this country than we do. If push come to shove, we can show our lineage predates theirs. So what are you talking about? Don't you ever let some white folk tell you to go back to Africa. Tell them to go back to whatever Polish enclave or Eastern European or Irish potato farm that they came from. You don't ever let them push you out of your country. You are the most American of all Americans because you're the ones who actually had to fight for all the rights that America promised everybody. You forced America to do the things that it said it was supposed to do. Nobody is more American than foundational black Americans. I want you all to keep that in mind. And I'm so tired of these folk out here saying, oh, America will bend to the will of those who are strong enough to take it and hold on to it. This is just land on the earth, and this is God's earth, and you are God's child. The land belongs to everybody, but it belongs to nobody. Everybody has right, nobody has right. It's whoever's strong enough to take it and hold on to it. So stop acting like you don't belong, black people, especially my foundational black Americans. Stop acting like you don't belong. This is your country. It's yours because God said it was yours. It's good yours because you're a child of God. Keep that in mind. But anyway, let me get back on. I can rant, But anyway, so basically, man, the Deacons stood up and they had this this thing. They said, we will live, we will fight, and we will not die quietly. You see what I'm saying? But here's the thing. Following this bold emergence of the Deacons of Defense in Jonesboro, justice didn't fade into some local legend. They multiplied. And the message began to spread, and the model of armed community self-defense across the South, it went. The next major from, they went from, as I said earlier, they went to Bogalusa, which is a timber town that has a long, bloody history of anti-black violence and deeply entrenched racial hierarchies, and one of the most active Ku Klux Klan chapters in the nation. Bogalusa was a powder keg. You see? They even at the local paper mill, it was called the Crown Zellerbach Paper Mill. They had these strict racial segregation. They would suppress labor organizing, particularly amongst black voters. And so by 1965, the Klan particularly, it ran the town. And black residents were routinely harassed and attacked and unalived, while the local police looked the other way or sometimes joined in. And this was the environment of open racial warfare that the second official chapter of the Deacons, this is where we formed. So we went to the heart of it. You see what I'm saying? You see how quickly black men, righteous, upright black men, shut down all of that? You see, and this is what happened when you're dealing with bullies. Because at the end of the day, the Ku Klux Klan and all these, they just bullies. The only reason they think they can win is because they think we got more guns than them, but you ain't got no heart. You see? So after establishing a foundation in Bogalusa, Ernest Chili Willie Thomas and Frederick Douglass Kirkpatrick, they handed leadership to 3 other courageous men. A fella named Robert Hicks, they call him Bob, and he was a World War II veteran. He was a proud homeowner, and he became the public face of the Bogalusa Deacon. He had already been under surveillance by white supremacists, and he refused to back down. And when the Klan firebombed his house while his children were asleep inside, it only strengthened his resolve. There was another brother named Charles Sims. He was a local activist and a strategist, and Sims helped organize patrols and establish communications between chapter and coordinated defense efforts with civil rights groups operating in the area. And there's another brother, A.Z. Young. He was a charismatic young brother, the marcher, tireless. You know what I'm saying? He became known for his determination and dignity, and he stood on the front lines during the protests and the parades in defiance of the Klan. And together they transformed Bogalusa into this highly disciplined, effective defense force, okay? And the Deacons of Bogalusa, they weren't just guarding homes. They escorted these civil rights workers and protected the marchers, and they formed armed motorcades, and they shielded children walking to these newly integrated schools. You see? So the National Guard couldn't be everywhere. You had black men armed with guns taking care of their children. You see? And the tension reached a breaking point when the first black deputy sheriff of Washington Parish, a man named O'Neal Moore, was assassinated in 1865, shot in broad daylight. And the killing was, quote unquote, never solved, and no charges were filed. What happened to Back to Blue? Only if he don't look like you, right? Let that be a lesson to all you black officers out there. Thin blue line, right? But this brazen act it only conformed what many already knew. Black people could no longer rely on the state for protection. And in response, the federal government invoked Reconstruction era laws, including the enforcement of an act called 1870, and they deployed the federal marshals to monitor the Klan. And as a direct result, the Deacons' presence and the rising public pressure, that's what happened. It was getting hot down there in Bogalusa, you see? So the thing is, chapters, well, let me say this. In 1966, after the civil rights activist James Meredith was shot while attempting to march against fear from Memphis to Jackson, Mississippi, the idea of armed protection became unavoidable. It had to happen. And activists, including Stokely Carmichael, Floyd McKissick, and even Dr. Martin Luther King, who had long adhered to nonviolence, were forced to reconsider how defenseless black people should be, how they should deal in the face of white aggression. So Carmichael, who would later popularize the term Black Power, argued that nonviolence should remain a strategy, not a moral code. You understand me? It's a strategy. It's something that we use when it's optimal. It's not something we adhere to forever, no matter what, in all circumstances. And the Deacons could serve a crucial role in protecting the movement. So the man who invented the term Black Power said we need to get these deacons for defense out here. You understand me? So do you see where this term Black Power came? You see, hopefully it's all starting to fall in for you, because we went from way back to 1500 and we all the way up to 1965. Some of your mamas were alive. Some of you all have heard remnants of this story, but nobody ever talks to you. Are you learning something? Are you learning something? I'm gonna ask you a little later on. Are you learning something? Nevertheless, after this time period, this is when the Deacons of Defense, their impact became fully national. Chapters, they had 21 chapters all across Chicago, Detroit, 21 chapters, and 46 affiliate chapters, including covert units that trained quietly within church basements and veteran halls. That's some brothers, that's some strategy right there. We don't need to make a big show about this. We know who we are. You understand? In each city, they work with the local NAACP units, the SNCC organizers, and the black churches. And they provided armed escorts and counter surveillance and tactical planning to keep organizers alive. So you telling me in all these nonviolent movements, all this NAACP, they had the Deacons of Defense. Why haven't we heard about this? Because this is not something they want to tell you about. They don't want to tell you about your willingness to put it all on the line, especially black men. Ladies, sisters, they want you to think black men were on their knees begging and we shall overcome. You that ain't tell you they had a brother right over there with that thing on him standing right. They never tell you that. They want you to see black men as cowards and cowards. They want you to believe we was all turned the other cheek. They didn't know brothers had that iron with them, surrounding the thing, doing counterintelligence. That we knew the FBI was here. We know where they stood. So they watching our people, and our people are watching their people. It's a beautiful thing. You see what I'm saying? And this is America. It's a beautiful thing. This is what we do in America. I love it. I love America. Yeah, freedom. This is what freedom looks like. You see what I'm saying? Now, the media is going to downplay the role of the Deacons of Defense. That's why you don't really have a lot of conversations about it. You see? But the FBI director, J. Edgar Hoover, he saw him as a serious threat. You see? And so COINTELPRO, the FBI began to aggressively target the Deacons, and they infiltrated the meetings, and they recruited black informants, and they harassed some of the members with round-the-clock surveillance. But by then, the Deacons had already shifted the tone of black resistance in America. They did what they had to do. And so what was the legacy of that? They left the blueprint for the Black Panthers and everybody else beyond. The Deacons began to decline in 1968. So about 4 or 5 years later, they set the blueprint and they began to decline. They had done what they were supposed to do. And what ended up happening was the Black Panther Party had captured the national attention. Now, the Black Panther Party, a lot of students, okay, a lot of young people. These older brothers, they old. You see what I'm saying? 45, 50, 55, these are war veterans. They'd put it on the line before. But the Black Panther Party picked it up. Young folk, students in Berkeley, out of California. Them old boys from the deep South, Louisiana, they thought different, moved different. But nevertheless, the Deacons of Defense, they proved that armed black resistance was not only possible, but effective. And they forced this white power structure to reconsider their impunity. They gave rise to a generation of black activists who refused to beg for rights already guaranteed by law. And most importantly, they reminded black Americans and the world that nonviolence is a tactic, not a surrender. And when peaceful protest is met with violent repression, self-defense is not radical, it's rational. That's the same thing our black ancestors figured out. Somebody typed Florida problem in the chat room. Somebody typed the Creole in the chat room. This is America. This is what I don't want you. This is the most American thing that has ever, this is what makes America great. We fight for our freedom. You understand what I'm saying? We're not out here begging. The founding fathers of our country didn't beg Great Britain for freedom. They didn't beg the king. They say, okay, if you want it, come take it. See, this is not history that you just read. This is not in your child's textbook. This is not taught in anybody's school. And it sure as hell doesn't get a monument in Washington, D.C. Why? Because it terrifies the hell out of white folk. You understand me? The story of the Deacons of Defense and Justice was deliberately buried by white historians, white institutions, and white-owned media, liberal and conservative. Why? Because it doesn't fit the comfortable lie that America wants to keep telling itself about black people, that we're always passive and always docile and always forgiving and always nonviolent. You see? But what happens when you uncover a different narrative? What happens when you show black men not begging, but arming themselves and organizing and winning? That's the kind of story that keeps white supremacists up at night. That's scared the hell out of them doing slavery. And see, and that's the kind of truth that breaks the illusion of control. White folk live in a delusional state of mind. They just think that they need to do better in their history classes. So again, the Deacons of Defense and of Justice eventually disbanded about in the late 1960s. But that's not because it failed. It's because they had already reshaped the terrain of Black resistance and helped usher in a new era. So by 1969, most Deacons chapters disbanded or merged their efforts with other organizations. Some members became local NAACP chapters. They joined the churches, or they even joined Black Panthers or other self-defense organizations. The name faded from the headlines, but their impact never did. You see? Now, even though the Deacons of Defense were a regional force rooted primarily in the Deep South, their actions and tactics, it radiated outward. And so by the late 1960s, you had a new generation of urban Black radicals. Particularly, you had folk in the West, the North. They began to draw lessons from the Deacons of blueprint. And chief among them was Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale. These are two students at Merritt College in Oakland, California. They were influenced by a combination of Franz Fanon and Malcolm X. The real world examples like the Deacons, Newton and Seale, they were clear. Black people needed to defend themselves and patrol their communities and demand their rights, not ask for them. Where did you think the Black Panthers got that from? Patrolling their community. Where do you think they got it from? It's not a new idea. You understand me? But they don't talk about it. Because at the end of the day, the Deacons won. They didn't go to jail. They right there in Jonesboro right now. It's an interview with one of them talking about. He's sitting on his porch. Yeah, we still here. Now, the Deacons had been secretive and defensive. They were smart. They were military minded. The Black Panthers, they were public, and they were offensive. The Black Panthers, they wore uniforms and black berets and leather jackets and shotguns, you see? They were not just about protection, they were about political theater. And they were in full view of the press. They began legally patrolling police in the Black neighborhoods, especially after the California passed the laws allowing open firearms, open carry. And the Panthers' first major demonstration came in 1967 when they marched into the California State Capitol in Sacramento, fully armed to protest proposed gun control legislation. This was supported by, at that time, Governor Reagan, and aimed at disarming Black community. That was a mistake. You see, that was a violation of law. Their demands were direct, they were bold, they were revolutionary. They wanted to end police brutality. They wanted full employment for Black people. They wanted decent housing, freedom for Black men in prison, end of the war in Vietnam. And they wanted too much. I'm just going to keep it 100 with you. Deacons kept it 100. Leave our people alone. Leave our children alone. We won't shoot first, but we will shoot back. You see what I'm saying? They had 10 points. I mean, this is the difference. This is the difference between a military mind and a non-military mind. See, the funny thing is, the Panthers were portrayed as these militant extremists, but they were also community builders. In the spirit of the Deacons, who had protected children in integrated schools and defended marchers on dusty southern roads, the Panthers created the free Breakfast for Children program and community medical clinics and ambulance services. And these programs they're acts of survival, and it was an evolution from the defense to a more proactive sort of nation building. And of course, they were targeted by COINTELPRO, and they were deemed to be the greatest threat to internal security in the United States. Leaders were infiltrated, imprisoned, assassinated, or exiled. But the torch had been passed, and the idea couldn't be killed. So, and that wasn't it. You see, they had more. They had more. I mean, we can go into the Move legacy. The MOVE organization in Philadelphia was founded in 1972. The MOVE organization, it was a man named Vincent Lephart. He was later known as John Africa. And MOVE was a Black liberation and environmentalist group, okay? And they lived communally. You know, they practiced raw veganism, all right? They opposed police brutality and industrial society and racism. You understand? They weren't the traditional armed group like the Panthers. MOVE embodied many of the same principles: self-determination, resistance against state violence, and the refusal to submit against unjust laws. And their confrontations with the police became more militarized over time due to frequent raids and surveillance. And so in 1985, there was this thing called the MOVE bombing. You understand? May 13, 1985, the years of tension with the Philly police and authorities, man, they dropped military-grade bombs on MOVE's row houses from a helicopter. They unalived 11 people, including some children, man. They burned down 61 homes. It was the first time in American society. Well, it wasn't the first time, because if you look at Tulsa, Oklahoma, and the Greenwood massacre, it wasn't the first time, but it was another time where an American city bombed its own citizens. And nearly all of them were Black. You see? And the bomb, this is 1985. Some of y'all were alive. You understand? It was a turning point in American history. It revealed the extremes the state would go to suppress Black resistance, even under the pretense of law and order. You see? And so after the fall of the Panthers, let's say around about the 1980s, and the MOVE bombing, there was noticeable quieting of formal Black resistance groups. Government surveillance, counter intel pro, mass incarceration, crack epidemic, the rise of neoliberal policies, all that worked to fragment the Black political power groups. And the cultural memory, it survived. You see, you got former Black Panthers like Assata Shakur. They went into exile in Cuba. Told stories of the Deacons and the community patrols and Black veterans. And, you know, you had many people returning from the Gulf War quietly began forming gun clubs and survivalist networks. And then you got the rise of Black gun clubs in the late 1990s and the 2000s, the UEP Newton Gun Club out of Dallas, Texas. In 2014, it emerged as the direct homage to the Black Panthers with armed patrols through the Black neighborhoods like the Deacons and the Panthers. Before them, they emphasized Second Amendment rights and community safety. You got the Elmer Geronimo Pratt Gun Club in Texas. The new Black Panther Party in 1989, okay? But it was disavowed by the original Black Panthers. Then you got Black Guns Matter by a gentleman named Maj Touré, focusing on educating inner city citizens on gun rights. Then you got this other group called NFAC, Not Effing Around, showed up in the 2020s to present. And this is the largest, arguably the largest, most visible of the modern gun groups. And it came about after the unalivement of Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery. The gentleman founded, his name was Grandmaster Jay. I think he might be locked up. I'm not sure. But they, I remember they showed up at Stone Mountain, Georgia. They showed up at Louisville, Kentucky after Breonna Taylor was unalive. And in Lafayette, Louisiana, a young man named Trayford Perlins was unalive. They dressed in Black. They march. You see? They say stuff like, we're not your enemy, but we will defend ourselves. And their core beliefs, all the members have no felony convictions, and they all have legal firearms. And they focus on self-determination, separation, and they advocate for a sovereign Black nation. You understand what I'm saying? So, you know, the thing is, the thread that ties all of them, from Ernest Thomas to Frederick Kirkpatrick in Louisiana to Grandmaster Jay in Georgia, all of these movements share key ideas. Self-defense is a human right. The American government cannot be trusted to 100% protect Black people. Legal armed resistance is, and that's something every American should know. Legal armed resistance is both constitutional and necessary, and Black unity and discipline and courage are more powerful than any weapon. Now, Black armed resistance isn't about glorifying violence. It's about controlling the terms of our survival. In the 1960s, that meant confronting the Klan. In the 2020, it meant demanding justice from a government indifferent to Black death. The question is, now, will this legacy continue into the next generation? Will young Black men and women learn the history of the Deacons, the Panthers, Move, NFAC, and are they going to understand the cost of peace and the price of freedom? Are you going to take the opportunity to learn about what our Black enslaved brothers and sisters and ancestors did to free themselves? Are you going to take the opportunity to do that? It's only so much Uncle D can do. Somebody type Uncle D in the chat room. It's only so much I can do. I can only talk to you so long before y'all get tired of me, right? Now, at this particular time, I'm going to take this opportunity to thank everybody and read the super chats that have rolled in. And also, I'm going to take the opportunity to thank the Cash Apps. Did you all learn something this evening? Did you learn something? If you learned something, let me know. If you learned something, I'd like to know, okay? First off, I didn't really get any super chats, but that's okay. Now, I got 25, the Cash Apps. I got 25 super chats. Shout out to Alice Ransom, Vernon Travis, and Alan Whitfield and Frank Chapman. Thank you so much. Also, Mr. Williamson and Mr. Randy Irvin. Let's go ahead and read these super chats. And I'm not finished. I have some more work to do. Okay, I got some more work. I got to bring this home. What we're talking about tonight, why Black Americans won't be deported? Because we will fight. Have I proved that we will fight? If I prove to you through history and what we've done in history, have I proved to you that we will fight? If I have, type fight in the chat room. Okay? If I prove to you that we fight, this is our history. You understand? But anyway, shout out to Yaya's Kids. Thank you so much for the $5 super sticker. I appreciate you, family. Tobias Judah, I'm learning something, Unc. I appreciate you too. Thank you so much. Surrogate Keeper, thank you for the $10 super sticker. I appreciate you. Also, the Crimson Cure, thank you so much for the Crimson Cure. Thank you so much for the super sticker. Look, we got 25 super chats, man. Y'all see if y'all can get me to 30. It's a little light tonight. We need to get 30 so we can be purdy. You understand what I'm talking about? Like this beautiful white rose I have right here. So let's see if we can get me to 25. Only if you earn something. You didn't earn, if I didn't teach you anything, you didn't learn anything, fine. I'll try harder next time. But if you learn something, I should earn something. And don't be selfish with Uncle D. You understand what I'm talking about? Shout out to Urban Eagle. Thank you so much. I appreciate you for the $10 super sticker. Rico the Great, Us's, thank you so much. That's right, brother. Thank you so much. Johnny Harris, Army Battalions up to 1,000. Man, they had a lot of Black folk out there willing to fight. Man, I'm telling you, man, the brothers, they were sisters, was in it too. Shout out to Mr. Good Vibration. Thank you so much for the $10 the super chat. Also, Johnny Harris, I appreciate you. So we help ourselves by ourselves. So why can't these immigrants understand that? Totally respect. Yeah, they refuse to accept the fact. And how we got on this subject, because you always have these immigrants saying how we beg and we don't fight, and you know, white folks had to free us, and they don't realize we freed ourselves. We fought. We put so much pressure on them. They had to let us go. You can't hold them. You can't hold that wild tiger in that cage. They're not gonna do it. You see what I'm saying? But anyway, thank you so much, Jack. I appreciate you too. Yaya's Kids, thank you for the $20 super sticker. And I cut back on the foul language because I want young people and children to be able to listen to this. I want you to literally be able to take this and talk about it with your children so they can understand our heritage. We got 26 super chats now. Let's see if we can get to 30. Yaya's Kids, the part, teach, I will. Blizzard King, I shall. Thank you so much, Johnny Harris. Native Americans are immigrants from Asia. That's correct. Work hard. Somebody type work hard in the chat room. Hologram EMC. Thank you so much. Lance Jackson, back in college, I took American history as an elected. We learned about the Anthony Longo case. We were told this was the first documented case where racism was used. I can't find this information nowhere now. Thank you so much, fam. I appreciate you. Kenneth Bradford, thank you for the $5 super sticker. Thank you, Trip D, for the $5 super sticker. Thank you, Liana. Thank you so much, sweetheart, for the $9.99 super sticker. Aussie, a dime divine. Thank you. This is great information. Keep spreading the word. Yeah, that's right. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Money Motion, thank you for the $10 super sticker. Okay, Money Motion says, appreciate you bringing our history to the uninitiated. I grew up visiting the Buffalo Soldiers National Museum on Caroline, and I learned a whole lot more than just us fighting the USA. Thanks so much. Yeah, you're right. I appreciate. I used to go over there too, man. Right over there. My sons and I take karate. Well, they take Shotokan. I take Kaju Kembo right over there in Third Ward, man. So yeah, I'm very familiar with the Buffalo Soldier Museum. JR, thank you for the $4.99 super sticker. James Mitchell, thank you so much for the super sticker. We still got 26 super stickers, man. I got to do a much better job. If I talked that long and y'all didn't learn anything, golly, I got to do better. I was trying to get to 30 super stickers. I guess we're not going to make it. Learn so you should be earning. Great lesson tonight. Thank you so much, family. Solomon 321. 4:35 to 45 minutes, $4.99 super sticker. Thank you so much. Eddie Washington, thank you. So I got 5 on it. Thank you so much, Eddie. You got 50 on it. Thank you so much for the 50. And GCLA, thank you too for the super sticker. Also, Evildoer, Uncle D, you're a GOAT. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate you. All right, so here we go. I got a closing statement for you, and I'm gonna ease on up out of here. And this is very necessary. It is very, very necessary. What brought about this? Let me let y'all hear something, because I don't think you understand why I found the need to have this conversation. Listen to this.
Relationship with
Nurse.
I hate them. I hate them. End of story.
So before this any come together, there's a lot of hatred, disdain, and jealousy that needs to be removed. A lot of dead weeds. This is a 59-year-old nurse that's about to say what they're about to say.
Africans and African Americans, we've never gotten along. Not today, not yesterday, not 20 years ago, not 100. We've never gotten along. We don't get along. All I'm saying is that stay in your lane and I stay in my own lane. I don't have any interest or desire to have that kind of relationship that I know will never be. There is no need for me to pretend to like you. You don't like me, and I with my full chest. I don't like you either. So this one that we're supposed to come together, don't ask me to come and join you to march down the street for whatever cause it is you're marching. I'm not coming to march anywhere with you. So all I'm saying is that, why are we here asking each other to get along, thinking that, we think African sisters were better than, I think I'm better than African American. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't have any African American friend. I don't need to be friends with any African American. There's nothing friendship with them that I find interesting. Through in university, I don't have any ounce of interest in developing any type of relationship with any of my African
American sisters. Sounds like you went through some really traumatic experience.
I don't have any interest. Zero. If I see you coming down the road, I turn around and go the other way. I don't have any interest whatsoever to have a relationship with you. I hate them. I hate them. End of story. Very solution. I hate them, period. Saying I beat my full chest to say I take ownership of how I feel. You don't have to expose me. I will tell you how I feel. You don't have to second guess me and say, these people are this thing, that thing, and I'm going to expose them. You are not exposing anything. Me, I will tell you how I feel. And I'm telling you how I feel.
So in conclusion,
lack of respect. It's a lack of respect because these people, they don't respect us. They don't fear us. And it has a lot to do with the fact that we don't teach our history. But you do have brothers and sisters who are coming out.
When you black immigrants say things like this, It just shows how much you don't know about Black American history and how much of white American propaganda you've been slurping up. All my Black immigrants, just for the record, we're going to say this for the record. Black Americans are the only groups of Blacks in the whole entire world that are still dealing with the oppressors. We didn't run and we have not been defeated. Just in case you forgot, that's very important for you to understand. So what I think it is, I don't think a lot of y'all understand how high the racial tension was between Black America and white America after slavery. Jim Crow, the Toulouse massacres, dealing with the KKKs, police brutality. Why you think we started the Black Panther Party? Why you think we had them guns out in the white boy's head ready to unload? Just in case a pig got out of line. You know what I'm saying? What you think that was about? I'll even argue this. The reason why they even let you other Black groups in here, you other Black immigrants into this country, is because you guys were brought here to be a more docile group of Blacks. They knew the tension between Black America and white America was too high, that they got to bring somebody in here who are going to work the jobs and for cheap and who are going to comply because you guys were desperate. You Haitians, you Jamaicans, you Africans, you guys are coming from failed countries and failed islands and you're just looking for work. We were not that desperate. We was putting belt to ass and it was going to continue. So if you want to ask why we are not.
Somebody type belt to ass. Somebody type belt to ass. Somebody type, I know we're not cussing, but remember, ass is a word in the Bible, okay? As in the jawbone of an ass, okay? Family friendly. Nevertheless, as the brother said, we put belt to booty. And we're still here because we will fight back. And let's make something clear. There is an unspoken understanding between Black people and white America. It's not our marches, as you've learned tonight. It's not our peaceful protests. It's not our signs or slogans. What keeps us from being completely overrun in this country, what makes America think twice before unleashing unchecked terror upon us, is our willingness to defend ourselves, not to attack, not to try to overtake or conquer, but to defend ourselves. And whether it was the Deacons for Defense in Louisiana, the Black Panthers in Oakland, or the NFAC in Georgia, white America learned harsh lessons. Foundational Black Americans do not beg for protection. We provide it for ourselves. We don't need permission to exist. And the very foundation of our continued presence in this country is not because they love us, but because they fear what happens if they try to erase us. Why foundational Black Americans will never be deported? Let's make it plain and undeniable. Foundational Black Americans will never be deported. Under the rights we hold as citizens of the United States, you do not have the right to deport us. Now, I don't care what president we have. You don't have the right to deport the people who built this country. You don't have the right to deport the people who bled for it. You don't have the right to remove the descendants of those who were forcibly brought here in chains, who worked this land under torture, who survived slavery, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, COINTELPRO, redlining, mass incarceration, and still didn't break. And you certainly don't have the right to deport the people who were here before many of your ancestors ever stepped foot on this soil. We are not immigrants. We are imports. We didn't come here seeking opportunity. We were dragged here in shackles, or we came here as explorers long, long ago. And from the moment our feet hit this soil, we never ran. Not once. We have fought. We fought for our lives, fought for our families and our freedom. And that fight is woven into our identity. It is laced into our very soul and in our DNA. Deportation is for the docile. It's for the compliant. It's for the people who know deep down that they don't belong and don't have a claim to this land. It's for the people who can be pushed, bribed, or scared into submission. We don't submit. We resist. We're not here on borrowed time. We're not guests in this land. We are the landlords of this nation's moral debt. So if anyone dares to imagine rounding us up and sending us back, understand this: we will fight you. We will die, and we will make you bleed and die. Yes, we will kill if it comes to that, because there is no retreat for us. There is no exile. This is our land, and we're not going anywhere. We're willing to fight to defend our right to stay in this land. I'm talking about my foundational Black American brothers and sisters who have been here for centuries. I'm not talking about immigrants who just got here, who are here illegally. We are here before the laws were founded. Now, I want you to just imagine this nightmare scenario. The U.S. government signs some executive order and passes some emergency law and claims it suddenly has a right to round up foundational Black American people, the rowdiest people that have ever stepped on this land. And they want to, quote unquote, relocate us somewhere. It doesn't matter where. Just out of sight, out of mind. It might work at first. The first dozen brothers, you might get the first 100. They might disappear in the dead of night, put on some buses and loaded on some planes and snatched up like ghosts. But once the word gets out, once Instagram starts popping, once TikTok starts popping, once those text messages, mass chat, it's going to be cracking. It's on and cracking. Understand this. You're not dealing with some passive population. You're dealing with over 35 million foundational Black Americans with that slave blood still pumping in our veins. We got that blood of rebellion rolling through us right now. The blood of those who fought back on slave ships, who fought back in the cotton fields, who fought back in Nat Turner's Uprising, in the streets of Tulsa, in the cane fields of Louisiana, in the swamps of Florida, and with the Seminoles. The blood of the Deacons of Defense, of the Panthers, of the armed veterans from Korea and Vietnam and Iraq and Afghanistan and World War I and World War II. And that's us. The Revolutionary War, the Civil War, all the wars. You think you're going to just round up foundational Black Americans and put us on a boat again? No, we ain't them. We are not our ancestors. You better think again. If you even try it, this country will grind to a halt. No planes, no trains, no semis, no power grid, no water system, no telecommunication. Everything is going to stop if you try to get us up out of here like you do the Mexicans and the Africans and all them folk. It ain't happening. This is our land. We're integrated into every inch of this nation's infrastructure. You try to illegally deport foundational Black Americans after all we've done to prop this country up and save it from itself and save it from its enemies, foreign and domestic. From the military to the post office, we'll shut everything down, from the sanitation to the civil engineer, from the hospitals to the shipping ports. And you try to remove the righteous foundational Black Americans who were here before some of your Polish and Irish and Italian ancestors. You better get up out of here. You remove us. You remove us, you remove the functioning heart of America. And let's be honest, you've only got 1 million military personnel. You got fewer than 900,000 police officers, many of them Black. 2/3 of the, 1/4 of the military is Black. What are you gonna do with 35 million foundational Black Americans ready to fight for our lives and our livelihoods and what our ancestors fought for? And no, not everybody's gonna fight, but that's not the point. You don't need 35 million people. You just need 1 million who refuse to kneel. They did it with less than that in Florida. 1 million who say, you will not take me, you will not take my children, and you will not erase my people. In Florida with the Black Seminoles, you had 20,000 fighters, and they fought for 4 decades. So how long do you think 1 million or 5 million or 10 million foundational Black Americans are going to hold the line? You're not looking at decades, you're looking at generations of resistance. You're looking at civil collapse. And we would be justified because self-defense isn't just a right, it's the American way. And there's nobody more American than foundational Black Americans. Even the founding fathers understood that. As Thomas Jefferson once said, the tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. And trying to change the law to get rid of foundational Black Americans, that is nothing short of tyrannical. Shout out to Kenneth Milo. We are the patriots now. I want all my Black American brothers and sisters to recognize you are the most patriotic group of Americans in America right now. I don't care what these people say. We've been here. And anyone who dares to become a tyrant should know exactly what refreshing that tree of liberty costs. This is our land, and we are not leaving. We're not going back to Africa. We ain't going there. And if you try to remove us, we will bury you beneath the soil of our ancestors died cultivating. Now I want to talk to you African immigrants and you Caribbean. I want to talk to y'all for a minute. Let's talk. I'm gonna be fair. I know that African and Caribbeans have a long and powerful history of fighting for their freedom. The Haitian Revolution, that wasn't a protest. That was blood in the soil and fire in the sky. And I talked to you about Gaspar Yanga in Mexico. I told you about the Sam Sharp in Jamaica. These were warriors. These were people who stood and fought. They didn't ask. They took their freedom. But here's the unfiltered truth. The ones who fight stay. They stayed to hold the line. They stayed in Jamaica. They faced Babylon. They stayed in Brazil and lit the hills on fire. They stayed in Nigeria. They stayed in Ghana. They stayed in Congo. They kept swinging. Just like our brothers stayed in Jonesboro, Louisiana, the Deacons of Defense for Justice, they stayed. They didn't migrate to Oakland and Detroit and Chicago. They stayed. They didn't run. See, the ones who fight stay. They stay in Haiti. They stay in Jamaica. They stay in Brazil. They stay in Nigeria. Let's dig deeper into what it really means to come to America through official channels. Shout out to Johnny Harris. Because all that smiling and flag waving and bootlicking some of these immigrants do, it's not just cultural, it's required. It's baked into the paperwork. It's written into the contract. They sign the moment they apply for a visa, a green card, or asylum, refugee status, or citizenship. Understand this. You don't get into the United States if you're a rebel or a freedom fighter or a revolutionary. You get in if you're quiet. You comply if you're not one of those people. You see? Let's break it down. The vetting process. Immigrants, especially Africans and Caribbeans, they know you. You must undergo an exhaustive vetting process. It includes a DS-26 or a DS-160. You're required to tell them everything about yourself, a complete biographical information, and you bet not lie. And then you got to get a I-485. That's an adjustment for a status of green cards. And then you got a N-400 for citizenship, an I-589 for asylum claims. All of these forms require one thing above all: total transparency and loyalty to the United States as is right now. Racism included. You have got to disclose all of your affiliations, your religious, your political, your military, or your revolutionary, and they're going to look at your internet and they're going to see what you've been doing. And if you were part of any liberation movement at all, if you picked up a water gun, they're going to know about it. If you attended a protest against the dog catcher in your community back home, they're going to know about it. If you got arrested for stealing muskrats down at the local pond, you better not leave it out or you risk denial, because they will find out. But here's the catch. Because see, if you lie and they find out later, your citizenship gets revoked. Your visa can be canceled. You can get deported. It's called fraud or misrepresentation. It's a federal offense. And then then they strip you for everything. So all this tough talk about these folks spitting about what the Haitians did in Haiti and what our people did, it wasn't you. Y'all talk about you not like these FBAs, these Black Americans, all this bravado, all that's a performance for you. You already bent the knee when you filled out the paperwork. You already proved to the American government you were safe. And safe people don't start no revolutions. You just come here as a buffer. That's all you are. You understand? These folks, you came in and swore to defend the system as is. The very same system that enslaved our ancestors and redlined our communities and sterilized our women and poisoned our water and shot our children and incarcerated our Black men. You just swore allegiance to that and said, I'm not going to touch it. You see, immigration into the United States is not about merit. It's about brilliance. It's not about hunger. You see? It's about usefulness. The U.S. State Department doesn't import rebels. It imports buffers, docile, educated, desperate people who will be grateful for second and third class citizenship and won't agitate too much about the racial injustice. As long as you can lease that Honda and take selfies in the mall and eat you some couscous and some mango, they let you in because you won't rock the boat. They selected you to serve, not lead, to soften, not sharpen, to assimilate, not liberate. So when you mock foundational Black Americans for standing 10 toes down in our struggle, you're mocking the very people who earned you the right to come here in the first place. You see? Even decades after naturalization, even after your family's here, all it takes is one tip off and you go home. And you know that. You're one audit away from being sent back to your third world country. We're not. We're born here. We're bred here. We're blood soaked into the soil. We don't need a visa to fight for what's ours. We don't need permission to stay on the land we built. We are the land. Don't forget that. Stay in your damn place. You got the nerve to walk around mocking American-born foundational Black Americans who have century. You got the nerve to call us lazy. Got the nerve to tell us y'all next, grinning at the thought of mass deportation of foundational Black America. Let's be real about who you are. You were vetted. You were pre-screened. You were filtered. You were sanitized. You were selected, not for resistance, but for submission. You don't get past U.S. immigration if you're a rebel. You get in if you behave. So don't get it crossed up. These folk coming up in here talking about whatever the hell they talking about, these are not freedom fighters. They're flight runners. They don't represent the warrior spirit of their people, whether it's Haiti or Jamaica or Trinidad or Ghana or Nigeria. That ain't them. That warrior spirit was left behind with them. These folk, these immigrants over here, first generation, second generation, all of them, they represent the buffer class, the ones who chose to assimilate, to pacify, and when needed, they'll snitch. So let's stop pretending they speak for Jamaica. Stop pretending you speak for Haiti. Stop pretending you speak for Nigeria or Brazil. You don't. You speak for the United States State Department that flew you in. You speak for the NGO that handpicked your black behind or your brown behind. You'll never challenge white power. You beg to get close to it. We know that. The ones who flee to the United States, the ones who get vetted and approved through immigration systems that are designed to select the docile and compliant, non-disruptive people. These are not warriors. They're not the ones who will fight. That's why they want you black Americans to come out there and fight for them, because they ain't got no fight in them. Here they are being deported and whatnot. They want black folk to black Americans to come out and fight for them, because these are runners, not gunners. They don't represent the people they left behind. And so we need to stop pretending they do. See, what we're seeing in these immigrants here in the United States, whatever country they come from, especially the black and brown, this is the top 10% of their class. These people are bougie in their countries. They come from the elite in their countries, especially the African immigrants. They come over here with PhDs. Because they come from the elite. You're over there stealing money from your own people. That's why you got these banana republics. The average person in Nigeria is pooping in a hole. Because you confiscate all the NGO money. So your own people suffer because of your greed. You didn't come here to fight oppression. You came here to assimilate and gain access and serve as buffers. And the same ones are so quick to criticize foundational black Americans for not working harder and not getting along or complying too much. You comparing yourself with average black folk who are still suffering with the same things that many of our ancestors had to deal with. You don't consider yourself, you don't compare yourself to the upper echelon of foundational black Americans. You compare yourself to the regular brothers and sisters on the street. You dare not compare yourself to somebody who's in the upper echelon. But the most important thing you need to understand is they don't understand the fight because they weren't in it. They were running from their fight. And now when they got a fight on their hands over here, they want us to fight. Let's be real. Many of these immigrants didn't form anti-foundational black American opinions after they arrived to the United States. They were trained to think like this way before they even got off the plane. That disdain you hear in their voices, that smug superiority, that's why, they can say stuff like, y'all need to work harder, even though we built this country. You see? It was inherited, it's conditioned. It's taught at home by their elite family members who groom them to avoid us at all costs. These are the same black people you want us to unify with. All you Pan-Africanists, this is who you want me to unify with? People who want to talk down to me as a foundational black American, who want to denote the fact that our people were enslaved? As if that's some sort of badge of shame. In countries across the Caribbean and Africa, the middle and upper middle classes, the ones most likely to afford or qualify for immigration, teach their children this. When you go to America, stay away from those black Americans. They're lazy, they're violent, they're drug dealers, they're trouble. That's not a guess, that's a fact. Ask any Caribbean immigrant who's being honest about it. And before their children even step foot on U.S. soil, they're drilled with stereotypes, not from Fox News or Hollywood, but from their own families. Elite mothers and fathers warn their sons not to date or marry foundational Black American women. Aunties tell their daughters and Black American men are criminals and deadbeats. Uncles tell them not to end up with, like some American Negro. That's that colonized mindset. It didn't just stay in Africa or the islands. It traveled with them. Let's be clear. These aren't just personal family biases. This is colonial residue handed down from generations, trained to view proximity to whiteness as superiority and resistance as inferiority. During colonialization, the British, the French, the Portuguese, the Spanish, the Dutch, all use the same playbook. They created buffer classes of good Blacks who mimic white values and distance themselves from the savages. That training didn't disappear with independence. It just went private. It moved into the homes, the churches, the schools, and the media systems of the post-colonial nations. And what group of people has been most consistently defiant toward white supremacy, refusing to assimilate and refusing to submit? Foundational Black Americans. So we became the target. Not because we failed, but because we refused to bow. So here's the thing. By the time these vetted immigrants who own this internet right now complaining about lack of unity because we won't step in front of ICE for them. Somebody put the ICE hotline in the chat room. Somebody please put that DHS hotline in, please. I need to put that up. Put the DHS hotline in the chat room, please, somebody. By the time they get over here, they're already preloaded with anti-FBA propaganda. They don't come to build unity. They come to keep their distance and uphold stereotypes and gain favor from the dominant society by being different from us. That's why you hear them say things like, I'm not like those Black Americans. Or here's a favorite, we value education. As if our brothers and sisters fresh out of slavery, the first thing they built was about 100 and some HBCUs because they wouldn't give us education. So we built our own. You had Black men and Black women in class with their little children learning to read just because they wanted to be able to read their Bibles. You say we don't have education. You say we have fatherless homes. Have you looked at the out-of-wedlock birth rate in Jamaica? What about the out-of-wedlock birth rate in Nigeria? Then they want to tell us you work harder. Well, why don't you work hard and fix some of those mud huts that you got going over there in some of these African countries? Why don't you do that? They love telling us we playing victim. Y'all playing victim now. Somebody call the ICE hotline. Let's call the ICE hotline. Stop resisting. We didn't play victim. We fought. They say this is not because they know us, but because they were trained never to know us. They were trained to view us as less and to exploit our civil rights gains while looking down their nose at the very people who made those gains possible. These same immigrants that we have in these diaspora wars with right now, Black America, foundational Black America, I need you to understand who you're dealing with. These aren't grassroots migrants escaping war and famine. These are the children of the elite of their countries. This is who we have in these diaspora wars with. They're obedient, they're pliable, They're the ones who follow orders. They were sent here by families who instructed them to avoid those akatas. Assimilate quickly, stay out of the Black American problems, marry up, keep the family name clean, and most of all, never align with people who bled for the rights they now benefit from. So the next time one of them speaks with arrogance and superiority or contempt, know that you're not hearing the original thoughts. You're hearing the voice of those colonial grandmothers, their military uncles, their French-educated father who never wanted them to sit next to you in the class or to stand next to you in a protest. And that's why many of them will never be our brothers or sisters, not to the movement of foundational Black Americans, because they weren't here to fight the righteous fight. They were sent here to avoid it and to avoid us. So shout out to the real ones who stayed. Shout out to the real Jamaicans who stayed in Jamaica and still fight and keep fighting. Shout out to the real Haitians, not these first, second, and third generation Haitians that's claiming the Haitian Revolution from 200 years ago. Shout out to the ones who standing strong for Dessalines. Shout out to the Brazilians who remember Zumba dos Palmaras. Shout out to the Nigerians resisting oppression. Shout out to the Dominicans fighting exploitation on the island. We see you, we honor you, but when it comes to the ones who leave, right, they try to look down and talk down to us while standing on our soil, drenched with our blood. They need to remember they were chosen to come here because they wouldn't resist. They were handpicked. They filtered. They're agents of assimilation, often collaborators, ones who were told to run, and they did. The difference between foundational Black Americans and so many of these who come here from the rest of the diaspora is this: we never had the luxury of leaving. We chose to stay and fight. And that's why we're still here. We didn't run from the Klan. We organized patrols. We didn't flee Jim Crow. We challenged it in court, in the streets, and in the fields. We didn't wait for someone to rescue us. We freed ourselves over and over again. And when the dust settles, we're still here. Not because of charity, but because of resistance. And that is the legacy of Black Americans. Defiant, enduring, and ready to defend. This is us. I hope you all have enjoyed this broadcast. I hope that I've done my part in helping set the record straight. As I said earlier, and I'll say it again, Black Americans, the vast majority of us, we just want peace. We want to be left alone. We want to be able to raise our children, and we want to enjoy America like every other American citizen. But I want to re-emphasize the fact that for anybody who challenges Black Americans and our Americanness, understand that we predate you. We've been here before most of you Europeans and everybody else who's here. This is our country. We stake claim to it. We fought in every war: the Revolutionary War, War of 1812, the Civil War, World War I, Korea, World War II, Vietnam, Iraq I, Iraq II, Afghanistan. This is our country. And nobody's just going to deport us without a fight. And that's the most American thing that I can say. This is Uncle D. I love you all. God bless you. Shout out to you all. God bless you all, and God bless the United States of America. I'm out.
Dennis Spurling.
In the city where the lights don't sleep, Uncle D got the vibe so deep. Representing men strong and free. Dennis Spurling's the king of the spree. In the streets where the rhythm flows, black men rising, that's how it goes. Uncle D got the truth to show. In his heart, that's where the fire glows. Late night tuning, light up the stream. Dennis Spurling, wisdom gleam. Voices whisper truth and insight. In his podcast, feel the light. Harmony in every word. Truth and laughter you've heard. Well, that's alright. Wave after wave of smooth delight. Dennis brings the dark to light. That's the liberty, baby! Share the tales unfold. Stories born like morning gold. Feeling the wisdom against the building. Subscribing like time after time.
Black men, I want to salute you. Your incarceration rate is down. The education rate is up. We up. We went from, we are doing great for ourselves. So you should salute yourself. Shout out to all the brothers out there, whether you're a truck driver or an engineer, whether you're an electrician or garbage man, a doctor, a lawyer, if you a hard-working brother, if you fresh out the penitentiary, but you on your grind and you doing it legal and you trying to make amends for yourself, man, I salute you too, brothers. God bless you. This is Uncle D, and you know, I'm out.